Welcome to Classic Trials. If you're new here, my name is Alita. I'm a lawyer licensed in California and DC, and on this channel, we make sense of the law one bite at a time. In this series, we observe and analyze the play-by-play of some of the biggest trials that have shaped the public consciousness of the American judicial system. In this season, we're working our way through the case of California v. Erik and Lyle Menendez. Growing up in Princeton, New Jersey, and then Beverly Hills, California, these young men had everything they could ever want, or so it seemed, until one night on August 20th, 1989, they approached Jose and Kitty Menendez with newly purchased shotguns. Put on trial for murdering their own parents, they claimed self-defense, arguing they were terrorized in their own home by abusive parents until they could take no more. Which argument is more convincing? Come join and see for yourself. All right. Happy Monday, everybody. Happy Monday. Happy Monday. We've got Indy in the background and we've got Holmes's tail, at least, hanging out here with us. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I hope you're having a wonderful Monday and a great start to your week. And I hope that you had a great weekend. I hope that it was nice and relaxing, or you maybe got caught up on stuff that you were kind of putting off throughout the week or maybe weeks prior. That was me. That's what I was doing. Kind of trying to get caught up on some stuff. Not 100%, but, trying my best. Really quick. So Shireen, thank you so much for gifting 5 Legal Bites memberships to folks in the chat. So James Woolard, Valentina Ducree, I think is how you pronounce it. I'm so sorry. TM, Requiem, and Raul P were all gifted memberships. And also Night Eyes, welcome to Bite Club once again. And I saw since then, Just Because also gifted 5 Legal Bites memberships. So Bronwyn W, Anna Fresky, Gwendolyn SS, June B, and Christina G have all been gifted memberships. So thank you so much to Just Because and to Shireen for gifting memberships, and to everybody that is now a member of Bite Club. Welcome, welcome. And I hope you guys can join us on Friday for our casual members only live streams over the next month. And hopefully beyond that. Also, I don't know if anybody noticed in the last 2 minutes, but I did do a little bit of changing in the studio here for the some lighting and whatnot, because I felt like it's late summer, early fall. We're kind of getting into those fall colors, and I just needed a change. So I finally put up the remainder of the lighting that I had intended to put up back in February. So that was another something that I did this weekend / today. It has a one. It kind of has some pumpkin spice vibes to it. That is kind of what I was feeling there. So I'm glad you're enjoying it. All right. So let's get into the next episode, right? We've got this is episode, what is this now? 35. This is episode 35 now. And we are continuing with Lyle Menendez's testimony. This is part 3. So we're going to get through one portion on Court TV's website and then partway through another portion, and then we'll call it quits during one of their breaks that they take. Part 1, he was talking about abuse by his father. Part 2, he was talking about, how do I describe it? Oedipal relationship stuff with his mom, which was very, very tough to listen to. Very creepy, strange, just all around. Just leaves you feeling very icky. So I don't know what he's going to get into today. I imagine he's going to start getting towards, what happened, moving on towards the decision to kill their parents, or their, I guess you could say their decisions leading up to that point. So yeah. And once again, as always, especially with this kind of testimony from the defendants, thank you, Draco Amy, for the trigger warning here. If you need step away for a while or catch the next stream, look after yourself 100%. If you are having a hard time at any point in time during any of these streams, take a step back. It's not worth your mental health, right? Like, I love having people here, of course. Obviously, I have every interest in having folks join us for these streams. But if it is too much, absolutely, like, it is not at all worth anyone's mental health to be sitting through such difficult testimony if it's going to be harming you mentally or emotionally. So everybody do what you need to do. So we'll be pulling up the trigger warning from time to time on this stream. And I think that's probably about it. So, okay. I think that's everything. We got everything. And with that, let's continue on. And also, before we do that, has a 1 member for 12 months, 1 whole year, new member status badge, and a taco. Awesome. Has a 1. Welcome to Taco Stage. I hope you enjoy it. And yeah, I suspect we'll have a number of people that'll be over the next couple months will be joining the taco level of Bike Club membership. So awesome. Thank you so much for being a member for over a year now. I appreciate the heck out of you and out of everybody that's been a member, whether consistently or on and off throughout the months. I really, really, really appreciate you guys supporting the channel like this. So, okay, with that, let's continue on, shall we?
And the juries for both defendants are back in court, and we'll resume with the direct exam.
As always, let me know if there's any issues with sound and whatnot, including me Elaining myself.
Nation of the witness. Would you state your name again for the record, please?
Joseph Lyle Menendez.
All right. I'll remind you that you're still under oath, and you may continue your direct examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Menendez, the other day we were talking about the expectations that your family had for you, particularly your father. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And he had expectations of you, particularly with regard to sports. Is that correct?
Yes.
But he also had plans for you in terms of where you'd go to school, where you would work, etc. Is that correct?
My whole life.
Who was going to make the decisions as to which schools you would go to?
Objection, Vegas to sign.
Who made the decision as to where you went to high school?
I would say my dad, but I really don't know if it's my dad and mom or my dad.
Did you make it?
No.
Who made the decision as to where you went to college?
That was my dad.
Did you want to go to Princeton?
It was fine with me.
Did you ever express an interest in going somewhere else?
Yes.
Where did you want to go to school?
I wanted to go to school at University of Pennsylvania or somewhere closer to where my girlfriend was going to go to school.
And did you apply to University of Pennsylvania?
Yes.
Were you accepted?
Yes.
Did you tell your father you wanted to go there to school?
Yes.
And yet you ended up at Princeton.
Right.
Left to make your own selection, where would you have gone to school?
University of Pennsylvania.
Did your parents also express strong opinions with regard to who your girlfriends were?
Very much so.
Who was your first girlfriend?
Stacy Feldman.
And is that the picture that's up on the board?
Yes.
And what years were you and Stacy together?
Until I was 18, I started between 15 and 16.
And did you consider this a serious relationship?
Yes.
Did you talk to her about marriage?
Yes.
Did you two pick out the names for the children you were going to have?
Objection, irrelevant.
Overall.
Yes.
And did you buy Stacy presents?
Yes.
What kind of presents did you buy her?
By the way, that overruled objection on relevance. I hate seeing someone get overruled on a relevance objection, not because I don't like them losing on it. I don't like a relevance objection being made and then getting overruled, because you know what it just says is you're trying to signal to the jury when you're making that objection, you're trying to signal to them none of this is important, and then the judge literally says, no, this is important. This is relevant. This is important. Sorry, you're wrong. So it ends up reinforcing to the jury that this testimony actually is important, and it arguably makes them pay attention even more. So just a little point on that.
Buy her.
Jewelry, flowers every Friday,
What kind of flowers would you give her every Friday?
roses every Friday.
What kind of jewelry did you buy her?
Bracelets and like a few hard pendants. Got her an emerald hard pendant for her birthday, and lots of gifts, and a whole family of stuffed animals.
When you say a whole family of stuffed animals, how many stuffed animals did you get her?
Like 20 of these white teddy bears that we called Pookies.
Why did you call them Pookies?
That was because of the Garfield cartoon. He has a little white or a little teddy bear he calls Pookie. When he gets insecure, he always gets his teddy bear. So
Interesting.
I got her that because we were
Related
apart
to insecurity.
so much as I lived with my parents. And
Did you think that animals would be comforting to her?
yes, they were soft, and they had made me feel safer. And then when you're feeling lost, and her parents were divorced and there were problems, and for me it was very comforting. Gave me, you could have your own little family there in the room with you and play. And so I slowly built up a family for her.
Were the animals that you had like family for you?
Yes, they were. They, especially early on, but really all the way through my teenage years, sometimes they got me through the day.
How did they get you through the day?
Just taking me out of where I was and into this other world of these friends was very important to me. And as I got older, it was embarrassing because really, stuffed animals are for little kids. But they were just important to me.
Is it embarrassing for you to talk about it?
Yes.
At one point, did Stacy tell you that she was going to break up with you?
Yes.
How old were you?
I was 18.
And how did you feel about that? Did you buy her something then, a big present to try and...
Bought her a fur coat, or actually I made payments on a fur coat.
How much?
I wanted to give to her.
How much was the what did you have to pay to get the fur coat?
I put down $150 or something like that.
And you were going to make payments?
Right.
Did she take the coat?
No.
And were you working at the time?
No.
Where was the money going to
I
come?
was training, playing tennis and stuff, but I wasn't working.
Where did the money come for all these animals and jewelry and fur coats?
My parents, they didn't necessarily give me the money for those purposes, but there was just money. My house had money just laying around, and
What do you mean just laying around?
my dad, every time he came home, he took out his pockets and he'd throw his money and his credit cards and everything on the counter, and just wouldn't pick it up the next day. My mom didn't do anything, and there would just be money around. And
So like
sometimes
literally
I would
laying
use
around.
that, but
Okay.
my mom and dad gave me quite a bit of money frequently.
Did you have use of credit cards?
Well, I had the money access card, which
How-
I used mostly. I had a credit card also, my mom's credit card that I was authorized to use, but mostly I just used the money access machine where you just put in the card and take out $100 or something. And
Yeah, I want to point this out really quick. Care Bear, Lyle was sick during this part of the trial, in case anyone's wondering why he looks slightly more uncomfortable today. Yeah, at the end of this, like the last 10 minutes, I guess, of this portion, is them having a conversation outside the presence of the jury where he's asking to basically be off for the rest of the day because he says that he's feeling really nauseous and he hasn't eaten all day, and so he's feeling very dizzy, and so he's not feeling well, and it's unclear. I got little bits and pieces of it as I was just sort of trying to find timestamps and stuff to manage the time for this episode. So I didn't see all of the conversation, but I don't know if they ended up. I guess they still pushed on because the next one he's wearing the same outfit. It looks like. Let me just see here really quick. Yeah, he's wearing the same outfit. So I guess they don't give him the rest of the day off, but he's and I don't know if it has to do with like the stress of testifying, the stress of being a criminal defendant in this kind of a case, the stress of dealing with the media and people like Saturday Night Live making fun of you and your brother and all of the trauma that you've been through, or if maybe he actually just caught some kind of a bug. Either of those is possible, and either of those is completely understandable. But yeah, definitely, obviously the jury doesn't know this. So it's interesting to see whether or not, oh, okay. Same outfit, different day. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you, Care Bear. So I guess they did give him the rest of the day off then, which is fortunate because the next section is like 4.5 hours long of just like straight testimony without, well, I guess they did take breaks, but I mean, 4.5 hours of him testifying after this. So anyway, yeah. So, but the thing that's interesting though is that we can know this because we're not the jury, and we can see these conversations, and obviously a lot of people in the chat have seen this trial before. So there's a lot of people that will know that and can understand that. But keep in mind that the jury doesn't know that. The jury doesn't have any idea why he might be a little bit more reserved today, why he might be a little bit sort of off center. All they know is he's uncomfortable and he looks like he's not as comfortable in that seat as he was the day prior. So it's an interesting thing to think about as we continue to work our way through the series, which is like, what does the jury know? What does the jury not know? And what might impact their opinion about the testimony that they're seeing? All right, let's continue.
was never a problem.
How old were you when you were authorized to use the money access card?
It was when we started in Pennington, since 6th grade, 12.
And did you have phone credit cards that you used?
We had the Sprint number and an AT&T number at one point. I don't remember when we had each, but and there was a company credit card, and I always used those.
And also, sorry, interrupting again, Maya Johnson, thank you so much for finding that calculation for inflation. Apparently $150 in 1980 is $589 a day. So he said that he was making payments of $150 for that fur coat that he bought for his girlfriend Stacy. So I don't know how many payments there were. I can't remember if he said how many payments there were, but other than that he was going to be making payments on it. So roughly $600 a month by today's standards. That's an expensive coat. That's a very expensive coat to be spending when you're 18 or 18 years old and you've got an 18-year-old girlfriend like that. But it's interesting that he says it's literally money was literally lying around. When he first said that, I thought it was maybe a figure of speech, but he said it was like just kind of sitting around on the countertops and stuff. Crazy.
We traveled a lot, and so I just always use it.
Would you travel sometimes without your parents?
Sometimes.
For
Certainly later on I did.
after the relationship ended with Stacy, who was your next girlfriend?
Jamie.
Yeah. Did your parents approve of the relationship with Stacy?
No.
Did they approve of the relationship with Jamie?
Much less so.
And what did they disapprove of with regard to your relationship with Jamie?
Number one, that they felt that she was after family money. She was a gold digger. And they felt the same thing about Stacy, although that was more my mom's feeling that she did not want me to be with any girls from a broken home, and the parents lived apart. And Stacy's mother had a boyfriend, and my mom was constantly complaining about that. But with Jamie, it was
Ironic considering how broken this home was. Obviously.
that she was after the money, and also she was always dressed in tennis clothes, so she had tennis skirts on and things of that sort, and my dad thought she was a slut, and my mother was just sort of beside herself about Jamie. And the first time Jamie presented herself to my family, she was dressed like that, and apparently my mom heard about it, and it just started from day one.
Did your dad tell you at some point of something he had done to try to interfere with that relationship?
Yes.
And what was that?
Well,
Was
the worst thing he did was
Jamie a tennis player?
she was a tennis player, and for a short period of time on a tennis tour because of my dad.
And how did that happen?
She was working in Alabama and at a tennis club, and my dad arranged secretly for her to be sponsored, because I was now at Princeton, and she was coming to see me a lot, and whenever I could, I went to see her, and this was upsetting my dad greatly. It's distracting me. So his idea was to send her off on the pro tour around the world. So he financed that through other people that approached her as if they were friends of the club, and helped finance her. Some of the people were financing legitimately, but the bulk of it was my dad's money. We didn't know it at the time. I found out later from him, and other relatives of mine knew about it and talked to me about it also.
Your next girlfriend after Jamie was Christy. Is that right?
Right.
And at some point, did Christy tell you that she thought she was pregnant?
Yes.
And did the relationship end with her shortly after that?
Objection, Vegas to time.
In the spring of '89, did you have a relationship with a young woman named Christy?
Yes.
And after you found out, after she told you that she might be pregnant, did the relationship end shortly after that?
Yes.
And did your father tell you he had done something in relationship to that relationship?
Yes.
Oh.
And what was that?
He had approached her, and he said he had approached her and paid her and basically intimidated her into getting an abortion.
After that,
Holy shit.
did you date a young woman named Charmaine?
Yes.
And how did you happen to meet Charmaine?
Well, after I broke up with Christy, actually the same day, or the next day, that I was sort of very down about it, and my dad came up to me and said, I have the girl you should date, and you should meet her and give her a call. She's wonderful, and she may be going to Princeton, and this is the girl for you. And gave me the number and told me to call. And
Yeah, just so you guys know that the visual and audio sort of interference that you're seeing here it's from the original feed. It's not YouTube, it's not my stream, it's not StreamYard. It's from whatever original recording that Court TV has. So no one is imagining anything. And hopefully it will pass very soon.
so I called.
How did your dad know her?
She was the daughter of a business associate of his.
And is this the first relationship that your parents approved of?
Yeah, only one.
In addition to going to Princeton, had she won some other title?
Yes, Dad said she was Rose Bowl queen. She was a beauty queen winner for the Rose Bowl parade. And
So she's kind of like Kitty in that respect, because Kitty was like a beauty pageant winner of something. I can't remember exactly what she won, but she had done beauty pageants before. Interesting.
I'm showing you what we've marked as 243. Is this Charmaine?
yes, it is.
Now, the picture we put up here of your mother, is this when she won a beauty title?
Yes, Miss Oaklawn.
And is this the girl your dad picked for you?
Yes.
Did your dad say he wanted you to marry her?
No.
Who was going to make the decision about who you married?
Well,
Jose.
Dad, we talked about that, and Dad said that he hadn't really decided what I was going to be doing exactly, as far as whether it was going to be politics or whether it was going to be business or exactly what. And
He was
once I had figured
woefully
that out
underprepared.
and was said in that, we would find out.
Who was going to figure this out, whether it was business or politics?
My dad, I wasn't going to be able to do it without my dad, and he was, he hadn't decided yet. And at the time we talked about this, I was a tennis player, and thought that I was going to be going in that direction. But
So since he hadn't decided yet whether you were going to go into business or politics, what was the connection between that and you getting married?
well, once we figured that out, we could decide what was the most, what was the appropriate girl, like
Oh, it's so House of Cards. Like basically just to have like a marriage that is arranged for political purposes so that he could, to gain power or something along those lines. Like it's just it's so cold and calculating and horrible. I hate it.
Charmaine seemed to be good for politics. But it just, the temperament of the girl, and just, obviously he would never want me to date somebody like Christy, who was too, he didn't think she was smart enough. And if I was going to be at business functions and so on, his experiences, somebody that's smart, knows the right things to say, will just sort of follow along with him, like my mother.
Now, who was going to pick this wife? Was it going to be you?
I don't know. We just talked about it in the abstract, and I imagine it would. He would approve of whatever. I just expected that he would eventually approve of a particular girl. We never really discussed that. I know that the choices I had made were disastrous according to them, and no way was I marrying these girls.
Did you love these girls? Did you love Stacy
Yeah, yes,
and Jamie?
yes,
And Christy was a shorter relationship, I take it.
yes.
Was this okay with you that your dad was going to decide what your future was going to be and approve who you married?
Yes.
You talked about going to Princeton and that you had applied to other schools as well. Did you fill out the college applications?
No.
Did you pick the schools that you applied to?
No, except that I asked that University of Pennsylvania be one of them.
And who picked the schools you were going to apply to?
I don't know. I mean, my mother was in charge of all the applications. She sent them out. She got the forms, and she filled them out. So I don't know if she was picking them or my dad. More than likely it would be my dad.
You said she filled out the applications.
Right.
Who wrote the essays that went with the applications?
Mom.
My mom, but I don't know. I got the essays in essay form. So I copied them.
You didn't write them.
No.
Did you assume that this is the way everybody applied to college?
Freshman or alumni?
Overall.
And my mom, the main essay was about my mom's dad. And I'm pretty sure she wrote that because it was all her personal knowledge of him. So that was probably her.
Did you think that this is the way everybody applied to college?
I thought it was. And then I talked to some of my friends, and Stacy filled out her own applications, but I thought that was because her parents didn't get along and the relationships were there were, it was a broken home, and she sort of went back and forth. I thought it was because she had no choice or something, but I assumed that that's what happened. All through my tennis sports life, I never filled out an entry form. My mom did everything with regards to that. I pretty much had no idea. Even my dad didn't have an idea of what tournament I was going to be playing next, unless it was a major championship and we knew it was coming up. We would find out like 2 weeks before. My mom would say, you have this coming up, and then my dad would start preparing. So it was the same with school.
And when you were in high school, who did your homework for you in high school? My
mother did a lot of it. My dad wrote some of the papers if he wanted to. I did. Otherwise, I didn't really do homework as much as I did studying for tests, papers, things that had to be handed in like that. Pretty much just got a grade off for the homeworks, or my dad had somebody do them all at the end of the year, and I handed them in late and just got a half grade. And this hurt my grades somewhat, but I seem to get a lot of leniency from the teachers because, of all the sports activities and all the things I was doing after school.
When you went to Princeton, did things change? Did you start doing all your own homework and papers?
No, it didn't change.
Oh, geez.
And who was doing the work for you in college? Was your dad doing some of the work for you in college?
Yes.
And would he decide which things he wanted to do?
Yes.
And did you have an assignment to write a paper about a work by Machiavelli?
Oh, interesting.
I don't know if it was they do about Machiavelli, or they gave you a bunch of choices. I think they gave you choices, and Dad picked Machiavelli.
Not surprising.
As that was just one of the things we had talked about early on in our life and all the way through, that kind of historical battles and things like that. So he, I was always reporting to him, and he was always wanting to know exactly what the assignments were, and especially since there was a lot of choices at Princeton as to what essays you would do or what.
Yeah, for anyone that's not familiar with Machiavelli, he wrote The Prince, which is like, it's known for being like having a very dictatorial, sort of totalitarian sort of attitude towards leadership. It's definitely not. It basically, let's put it this way. It basically is very reminiscent to the way that that Jose sort of ran the household, basically.
Electives, and so Dad wanted to know the choices, so he could, if he saw something that he could do easy, then he could just do it for me, and I could save the time. Then I had more time for.
And did you turn in a paper? Based on a work by Machiavelli, a work called Prince?
Yes.
And here I have an exhibit I'd like to mark collectively as 244 in the prosecution. May I approach?
Yes.
Mr. Menendez, I'm going to show you what we've marked as 244A, which appears to be a five-page typewritten paper. And I ask if you recognize that?
Yes.
And what is that?
This is a paper I did
Thanks,
for
AB.
one of my classes at Princeton in the fall.
Is this the paper we've been talking about?
Yes.
Regarding Machiavelli?
Yeah, this is one of the ones my dad did.
And marking 244B, which is a handwritten document. 10 pages in length, and ask you if you recognize the handwriting.
This is my
Dependency.
dad's.
Thank you.
I think this is the first copy of it that he wrote on live entertainment stationery.
And is this the first draft of the paper you eventually turned in?
Yes. And this,
showing-
his secretary typed this, and they FedExed to me, and I handed it in.
showing you what I marked 244C. And that's
I mean, so there's no way to really rebut sort of this series of facts, right? Because this is if the first draft was handwritten on live entertainment stationery, it was then typed up by his secretary and then FedEx to them. There's a lot of receipts involved in that. So the fact that he wrote that for him is very, very interesting, very intriguing. And I feel like if the jury back in 1993 wasn't totally hooked on this concept, I feel like today's jury really would be. I'm definitely very, my interest is very much piqued on this topic of Jose writing an essay on Lyle's behalf about Machiavelli based on everything that we have heard about Jose from literally everyone that encountered him. This is pretty wild.
I'd ask you to take a look at that. It's a 2-page typewritten document with handwritten corrections on it.
Yes, this was dictated. At least that's what my understanding is that it was dictated.
And is it a draft of this same paper?
Yes.
And In looking at the contents of this paper, does it reflect certain philosophies which your dad discussed with you?
Oh, very, almost exactly.
I'd like to direct you to the last paragraph. On the fourth page of this document. Does that paragraph particularly reflect the philosophy that your dad taught you?
Section number 1.
Yeah, this is definitely relevant.
Which one? This the bottom one?
Yes.
Or the middle one? Okay, the bottom one, yes. And the middle one.
Could you just read the bottom one for us?
Machiavelli's view of personal trust and loyalty is consistent with his overall premise. While it would be desirable to achieve personal trust and loyalty by one's subjects, it would be dangerous and foolish to base one's rule and the stability of the state on this premise. For personal trust and loyalty without the ever-constant presence of pain would, in his judgment, be set aside whenever it was convenient for the general population to do so.
Is that reflective of the type of instruction your dad gave you?
Yes, and he did this, I got a bad grade because he did it without the book. I had the book in New Jersey, and I kept telling him, you should buy a copy of the book. And he said, oh, no, I know all this.
And were you criticized because this was not truly a reflection of the book, but more a reflection of his own philosophy?
Section A.
Yeah,
Did you get a bad grade on it for a particular reason?
yes, the teacher said that it was interesting, but that it was basically just my ruminations and not reflective of Machiavelli's actual work in the Prince.
And whose ruminations actually are contained in that paper?
My dad's.
Were you suspended from Princeton?
Yes.
And were you suspended from Princeton because you copied another student's work and turned it in as your own?
Yes.
Ooh.
Did you call your dad and tell you that you were in trouble because of that?
Did I call and tell him?
Yes.
Yes.
And what was his reaction?
He didn't think I was even serious when I called him and explained it. I didn't want to call him. I was very nervous about it. My Aunt Terry said, no, you got to tell your dad this is serious. And,
Was he upset at the idea of you being thrown out of Princeton? Or
oh,
suspended?
very much so, yeah.
Was he upset because you had cheated?
No, that he got caught.
No, he didn't think that, he didn't think that I had cheated. He basically thought it was a joke and that they could jeopardize his son's life over a lab report was beyond his comprehension, and thought that the hearing was just supposed to be just like one of those things that just gets to that point, you go through the motions and then it's over with. And then when I got suspended, he was shocked and immediately flew to Princeton to meet with the president to get him to reverse it. And the president wouldn't do that, and, although he met with my dad. And my dad just thought the Princeton system was screwed up.
Why?
It's literally every school system.
Because I was there to meet people, make contacts, get the degree, and that the president of the university should realize that, and that's why he's the president supposedly, and it's not about doing lab reports.
God.
But you were suspended.
Yes, I copied the guy's work.
I'm sorry.
I copied he was my lab partner, but I copied his work. So I got suspended for a year.
And when was that?
That was January of '88.
And did you stay away from school for a year then?
Yes.
And you returned in January of '89
Yes.
or February of '89? Whenever
Yeah,
the school-
February, I think it starts.
During that period of time, did you go to work for your dad?
Yes.
And how long did you work for your dad?
A few months, like 2.5 months,
Now, was
maybe
this,
3 months at the most.
was this during the summer?
Yes.
And were you working full time?
No. 4 hours in the morning.
And what was your job title?
Didn't really have a title. I was just sort of a management trainee.
What type of jobs did your dad give you?
I had a bunch of different projects that I was supposed to complete. The business was paper oriented. The whole accounting system was done on paper, and I was supposed to figure out a way to computerize the accounting department.
Did you know anything about accounting?
No, but my dad was a CPA, so it was a big interest of his, and he felt that his company should be done on computers, although he didn't know anything about computers, and I didn't know anything about computers either.
So you didn't know anything about accounting, right?
Right,
You didn't know anything about computers.
right.
Did you know intimately about your dad's business?
No, but I was involved in meetings and things like that, so I got an understanding.
Did you have either the knowledge or the skills to accomplish this job?
No, I
No.
failed that job pretty miserably, although I did meet with all the accounting people, and they were pretty annoyed that I was taking their time.
Yeah, no kidding.
And I tried to work out the spreadsheets and figure it out. But I didn't get anywhere.
Did the accounting people seem to resent you being there?
Oh, yes.
Okay. What other
Sure.
projects did you have there?
I was in charge of, the worst one was I was in charge of reviewing the expense statements of the distributors in the field, what they spent on food and tolls, and check it over and see if I thought there were things that seemed improper or excessive. And they had ways to check if I needed to go that far, and then single out the ones that seemed to be different from others and excessive and report them.
Why do you say that was the worst one?
Because it was I felt like I was prying into. I just felt like it was no business of mine. It was just an awful job to have to do over people's expenses statements and figure out which ones are being excessive. And these people, knowing my dad, these people would be fired or demoted or something of that sort. And so it was an awful job, and basically it was a short one because I seemed to think that everything was in order.
Jeez Louise. I mean, it's no wonder though. I mean, it's absolutely zero wonder he has built up zero marketable skills throughout his high school and now college career before this point. So it's like launching him into these various tasks with zero experience and zero understanding of what he's doing, and just kind of expecting him to like pick it up and succeed is just so completely bananas. But it's in a sense, it doesn't really surprise me all that much. Because we know, I mean, even his academic achievements were not his own.
Did you have a number of other projects while you were there without naming them? Did you just have a number of other projects?
Yes.
Were you trained to do, did you have the training or the experience or the knowledge to do any of the projects you were given?
No.
Did you succeed at anything you did that summer working for your dad?
No, it was basically getting in the way.
And how about the people you worked around? Did they like you? Did they appreciate
No.
Oh,
your
no.
presence?
No, I mean, obviously they resented me, and I was just
Yeah, because he's a nepo baby.
the chairman's son. And they actually gave me an office in the executive section.
Oh, geez.
And I had to write reports on the state of the company as to how people were doing and walk around and talk to people. And nobody wanted to talk to me.
Did you get to observe your dad around the other people at work?
Yes.
Did they seem to like him and be comfortable around him?
Oh, no, they were. No, it was basically like a company ruled, like a little fiefdom, and he was sort of at the top, and everybody else was like equal underneath him. And they barely got moments with my dad, but when he came in, everybody would be quiet, scurry into their offices, and the meetings were just incredible amount of pressure.
I imagine, like, I'm imagining in my head, like the Devil Wears Prada, right before the main character. She's after, I want to say Anna Wintour because that's who she's based off of. But you know what I mean. Meryl Streep's character. She's coming into the office, and then and what's his name is like he turns. Everyone's like, "Gird your loins," and everyone's like rushing around, and that's how I imagine it to be
for everybody, including myself. He was very, he humiliated. I saw him humiliate people. I saw him dismiss people, not answer them when they asked him a question if he didn't feel it was worthy of an answer.
Yeah.
And he just, he was the guy that made things happen. He was like the Wonder Boy. And he really was. It was like magic what he did. And the stock just skyrocketed. So, they paid him millions of dollars. And
Did he
was
seem
it.
to, I mean, were there some people that he treated with respect?
Well, he brought, yes, somewhat. The people he brought from New York, who were, I guess, used to this kind of behavior. People, he brought a couple people from New York, and he would treat them
Thank you, just because.
a little bit more respect.
Do people seem to be afraid of him?
Nope. They were terrified
You got it right too.
of my dad. I mean, he was really, they didn't want to get fired, but they didn't want to get humiliated or cut down. And
How did this compare to your home?
compared to my home,
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't as, I mean, he didn't treat them as bad as, it wasn't as bad as the home, but it was, I didn't see him hit anybody or anything like that. But he just, it was just a state of, it was like a oppressed state at the office. So in that way, it was similar.
Over the course of your life, did you see your dad in social settings?
Yeah.
Around relatives and
Yes.
friends? Did he seem to be somebody who was in control in those situations also?
I wouldn't say he was in control. He just, when he was there, it was just a different atmosphere. And my dad was it was like a lonely, it seemed like a very lonely existence. In fact, I talked to him about the fact that it was a lonely existence because people were afraid to talk to him. And then he would come into a room, people kind of be quiet. I see him with family gatherings, and people kind of move out of the way. And adults sometimes, and the little kids were scared of him. Sometimes, like one of the female cousins would be willing to come up close to him and talk, and he would be very flirtatious and charming. But it was very much a tense sort of atmosphere around him, always.
Your parents moved to California in 1986, is that correct?
Yes.
End of the summer?
I think it was earlier, a little bit earlier. I think it was before the end of the summer, but it could have been the end of the summer.
Sometime in the summer of 1986? And you stayed in New Jersey?
Yes.
And you're now 18 years old, is that correct?
Right.
And did you stay living in the Mountain Avenue house?
Clarify,
Mountain
age
View house?
18 was in 1986.
Correct.
I said now.
Oh, I'm sorry, Your Honor. Thank you. 1986, you're 18 years old. Did you stay living in the Mountain View house?
Yes.
And did you take over things like paying the utilities, the phone, running the house?
No.
No way.
We had just moved our things in, and my mom settled in, and then the family left home. And the home was still there, and the things were still there, but the family wasn't. And I was still there because I was supposed to go to school that fall. So I stayed there.
And who took care of the running of the house, the paying the bills, that type of thing?
My mom did.
And
She ran all the family's finances, expenses. Everything was left up to my mother, except one credit card of my dad's that he handled through the office because he couldn't afford to have her miss payments and things like that.
and did she miss payments often?
All the time, yeah.
And when you were living in this house in Princeton, and they're in California, did she miss payments with regard to utilities and phone and things like that?
Yeah, the phone would go off, the lights would just go out, no electricity. We didn't have electricity for a few weeks in the winter. At one point, the phone I would usually try and get back on right away. She just, she was really in bad shape that fall. And I think whenever she got into those states of real depressed, sort of overwhelmed states, I think that was the cause of missing the bills.
Why was she in real bad shape that fall?
Because of my father's affairs, she had discovered, and she was suicidal.
What do you mean she had discovered?
Well, apparently she had discovered him because she would, it was Louise. She would constantly be yelling about Louise, hounding my dad with pictures that she had taken personally of Louise in New York, her walking down streets and stuff. Credit card receipts all spread out of Louise's, things my dad had supposedly bought for Louise.
Oh, geez.
Trying to track him down around the world because I guess he and Louise met around the world.
Oh, geez.
And she was just, really crazed with this. And
Are you talking about just the fall of 86 or?
no, this continued for about a year and a half. And she would always bring it up, but the really just attacking my dad, suicidal behavior was more of that period. Then it sort of changed a little.
And how would you know that she was in this kind of shape? Did you see it or?
Well, my brother would call me continually,
Was he upset?
frightened about her behavior or what she had done, or he was always upset about it, as far as being depressed about it. And I would see it whenever I flew out there, which was pretty frequently.
And did they fly back? Did your parents fly back pretty often during this period?
Very often. Our home was Princeton, basically, and that's where I was. That's where my Aunt Terry lived, all our relatives, where I went to school. That's where everybody was. And so they had moved to California, so they continually came back. My dad would pop in all the time. Not all the time, unexpected, I would say, at the very least once a month, but sometimes more than that. Just show up at my Aunt Terry's house because he would have business meetings in New York or in different areas, and then would always stop by.
How often were you talking to your father on the phone during, say, the period of 1986? For the year after they moved, how often were you talking to your dad on the phone?
I talked to my dad a couple times a week.
And what about your mom?
I didn't have a lot of conversations with my mom, but I would be at Aunt Terry's and she would be calling constantly.
And did they seem to be asking questions about what you were doing or what was going on?
Well, with my dad.
Rephrase the question, please.
In your conversations with your father, what would be the subject matter?
Pretty much the same as it had always been. Just exactly what I was doing with sports. Probably more detail than usual since he was kind of far away. I got the feeling that he wanted to know more exactly what I was up to, as far as, if I was changing strategy, if the coaches were changing my strategies that he didn't like, or he just was seemed to be concerned that I might drift off into some strange strategy or something that he didn't like. So I pretty much kept him up to date week to week. That's exactly what was going on.
And you said that you had conversations with him about what was going on in school and what papers, that kind of thing?
Yes.
At some point, did you get a call from your brother Erik that he'd found a particular letter that was upsetting to him?
Yes.
And do you remember when that was?
That was in right after I'd broken up with Stacy that fall.
So this would have been
Right before I met Jamie.
So this would have been fall of '86?
Right.
And what did your brother tell you?
Objection, hearsay.
Is it being offered for the truth?
No, for state of mind, Your Honor.
All right, the statement.
Then it's not received for the truth of what was said, just to reflect the state of mind of the declarant, is that it, or the recipient of the conversation? Okay, just to reflect the state of mind of Mr. Lyle Menendez, and is received only for that limited purpose.
So this is getting to the definition of hearsay. I remember how we've talked about this before. Lyle is about to tell the jury what Erik said in some kind of a phone call in the fall of 1986. So the jury isn't supposed to, the instruction, and I don't know if this is something that is, it definitely doesn't come naturally to people, right? But when you hear that somebody said something, sometimes it can be hard to parse through what you're supposed to take away from that statement. And in this case, Erik's statement is not supposed to be taken for the truth of the matter asserted. So for whatever it is that Erik is telling Lyle about maybe something that happened or something that was going on, but for Lyle's mental state. So how did this make an impression upon Lyle and what he was thinking and what he was feeling?
Did your brother read a letter to you?
Yes.
And was that letter written by your mother?
Yes.
And what did that letter say, basically?
Basically said that she had no other way out, that she couldn't handle the shame of a divorce from Dad, that her one of the something about that her fury that her mother had allowed herself to get a divorce, and it had ruined her childhood in a sense, and she was sort of an outcast because of that, and she would not allow that to happen. And so she was sorry that she had to take this way out, and that she was leaving. And that she realized that Jose, my dad, never loved her, and got what he needed from Louise, and she couldn't give it to him, and she was tired of it, so she was checking out. That's basically what she was saying. And
What did that letter mean to you?
well, I thought it was clearly a suicide letter. She wasn't just leaving town, and my brother didn't realize that at first, and I felt I should tell him that's what I thought it was.
Did you do anything?
With regards to my mom?
Yes.
Yeah. I told Erik that I would, to put the letter, he had just found it. And so I told him to just put it back where he found it on the coffee table thing with the books, and pretend that he hadn't found it. And that I would try, and I would talk to Mom, and we would try to lift her spirits and tell her that we would side with her in a divorce and let her realize that that's what she should do. And so that's what I told him I would do, and that's what I did.
And did she express appreciation for your concern?
No, she was just extremely upset and accusatory that I was trying to break up her marriage. How could I suggest that
Jesus.
she was unhappy? She said she never regretted a day of being married to my father.
But I
Did you
regret
know
being
she
your
was seeing
mother.
a therapist at the time?
Yes.
And did she say anything to you about pills that she was taking? And I'm talking about the pure.
So let me just answer really quick. Iglo Pop, how does this get her around here? How does this get around hearsay? So yeah, it's we don't need to know whether or not Kitty was actually suicidal. That's not something that is necessary for this whole conversation or for this trial. But it is helpful to know that Lyle had that impression based off of the letter that was written and that was found and that Erik had told him about. So that's why it's because the definition of hearsay is an out of court statement offered to prove the truth of the matter asserted. The matter asserted in this case would be whether or not, well, the truth of the matter asserted would be that the fact of Kitty being suicidal, which isn't why that's being offered. We don't care about whether she was or she wasn't. It was, what matters is the fact that Lyle was under that impression.
Period between 86 and 89. Did you ever have a conversation with her about pills she was taking?
Yes.
What did she say to you with regard to that?
She said that she was taking, this was at my Aunt Terry's house, and she said that she was taking 13 pills a day, and she showed them to me.
Whose fault was it she was taking those pills?
There's a false speculation.
Did she tell you?
Yeah, she told me that that I had to start doing better and stop upsetting my dad so much because he was coming down on her, and the whole thing was causing her so much stress. She was having to take these pills. It was actually a nice conversation.
What was nice about it?
Well, she was, my mother never reached out to me, and she came to me and said, and she looked very, very sad, and wanted my help to help her not have to take these pills, basically. And I tried to tell her that, I thought things would be fine, and there had been a lot of stressful times that spring, but I thought things were going fine.
Did you know that all of this was because of the affair?
Objection calls for speculation.
Rephrase the question.
Did you have information based on what your brother had told you and what you'd seen that her condition was because of finding?
Right, I knew that. I knew that it was because of Louise, and
But she was saying it was because of you.
right, but
Why was that nice?
because she was reaching out to me.
At some point during this period from 86 to 89, did your brother tell you your mother bought a rifle?
Objection, hearsay, which is
Sustained.
This is state of mind.
All right. I'm sorry?
irrelevant.
All right, the objection as to relevancy is overruled. If there is an answer, it is received only to reflect the state of mind of the witness here.
Did your brother tell you at some point in time that your mother
Yes,
bought a rifle?
yes, in the summer of '88.
And did your mother have guns already?
Yes,
What kind of guns did she have already?
she had her rifles.
Were you concerned about the fact that she'd bought this rifle?
Yes,
Why?
well, because I felt this whole period she was very much out of control, and she was having the same rages. She was extremely unstable, and seemed to be having that conflict with Louise with my dad, and very mad at the world, and was buying a new rifle, and I was concerned.
You said something about at some point seeing pictures of Louise. Is that right?
Yes,
And did your mother tell you how, excuse me, how she got those pictures of Louise?
I saw them twice. Once with her showing them to my dad, saying that she had taken these pictures, and another time from reading her journal entries that I found to help her deal with the alcoholism, and I guess it was her. I guess her therapist had asked her to write these journal entries because they were basically like written to him, and she was writing about how.
Objection calls for
Objection sustained.
State of mind again, Your
All
Honor.
right, it would be received only for that purpose, the state of mind of the witness.
What information did you have with regard to what she had done in connection with Louise
I don't understand the
and the
question.
pictures?
That she had gone to New York and found the woman and followed her and took pictures of her to prove that she was visiting dad.
And did the situation with Louise, your mother's concern over Louise, ever stop? Did she continue talking about Louise?
Yes.
And did she talk to your dad about Louise and what he had done in front of you?
She did, and like I said, in that later period, she did.
Was there an incident at the airport?
Yes.
Okay, can you tell me about the incident
A
at the
little bit
airport?
of leading.
Objection, Vegas to time.
When was the incident at the airport?
Incident at the airport was Christmas. Erik was going. Let's see what year it was. Christmas of '88, I believe. Erik had a tournament in Arizona, and we were all at the airport because we were all going to the tournament. It was a tournament that took place over Christmas. And we were at the ticket counter buying the tickets, and there were not enough seats. Oh no, we had the little dog, Rudy. That's what it was. So we had the dog, Rudy, and they wouldn't take Rudy because he hadn't been checked in properly and something about that. In any case, they wouldn't take the dog. Something about And my dad volunteered at the counter that he would stay behind and we could fly. And he was willing to stay behind with the dog and take the next flight after he was properly checked. And my mother just flew off the handle in front of the lady at the ticker counter and said, "Oh, so you can meet your girlfriend Louise in the bar?" And said, no, I'm not that stupid. And just, it was a huge scene. My dad was just standing there with the dog and said, "Oh, okay, Kitty, we'll all wait. We'll all wait." And we did. We just purchased tickets for the next flight, and then we left for the dog.
Yeah. Did your dad's reaction surprise you?
It shocked me.
Why?
It was just part of it was really one of the beginning of a number of incidents where she was very openly aggressive with my dad, embarrassing him in front of people. This was just unbelievable in front of the ticket counter. And my dad's reaction was zero, just a mask of being conciliatory. And it was like he just gave in to my mom. And
Was this different than who he'd been earlier in their marriage?
if that had happened earlier, I only saw those things happen in the house. If that had happened in the house, he would have struck her.
And what if it would have happened in public earlier?
He would have done the same thing, but I don't know. She would never have done that in public to him earlier. Even when she was not really in control of herself, she wouldn't go out of the house unless she was at a state where, they wouldn't be in public together where she was that out of control.
Was their relationship very different in California than what you had seen earlier?
It was completely different.
What was the change?
The change was that they were like more of a couple. Really, for the first time, I saw them as a couple in California, holding hands. My dad being very polite to her, basically agreeing to whatever she wanted, as far as where we would go, what we would do that day, if it was something she wanted to do. Even went shopping with her at times. Just stuff that could never happened before. Couldn't even imagine. And it was very strange.
Brenda, could we take a break here?
All right, we'll resume at a quarter to the hour, ladies and gentlemen. Don't discuss this case with anyone. Don't form any final opinions about it. And we'll resume at 15 minutes to 11. Now the parties are all present, all counsel. The juries are not. Counsel wanted to.
Yeah, so this is where they're going to get into the matter of Lyle not feeling well, et cetera, et cetera. And so we will remove this one and we're going to move on to the next section. Okay, bear with me for a second. Okay, here we go. All right. Okay, let's continue on.
During this period of time, or was it different?
It was the same, but a little more detail as to what was going on since he wasn't there.
And what type of detail would he ask you about?
Just exactly who I was in contact with, much more detail about my actual classes, school work than we did when I was in high school, and he pretty much didn't care as much. More detail as to who I was and whether I was spending my time at Terry's, what friends I had around me or not, how much time I was devoting to different things. A little more detail, I think.
Did he continue to question you about your tennis game?
Yes.
And with the same degree of detail that he had before, or?
The same, yeah.
And during this period from 1986 to 1989, how often would you speak to your mother on the phone, on an average?
Maybe maybe twice a week, not as often. She would call a lot more often, but I wouldn't talk to her.
Why not?
I would be at my Aunt Terry's most of the days, and she would just call several times a day.
We just call and say,
Several times a day she would call, at least it seemed like it was several times a day.
and would she ask you what was going on in your life in the same way, or were your conversations different with her?
They were much different, just reporting something my dad wanted me to know, letting me know when my dad was available to talk.
And when you say letting you know when your dad was available to talk, you mean scheduling your talks with your father, that type of thing?
Yes,
During this period of time, 1986 to 1989, did you speak with your brother regularly on the phone?
yes.
And was it the same over this period of time, or did it change? I mean, did you always speak to him with the same degree of frequency from 1986 to 1989? Or?
I spoke to him a lot in the fall of '86. I spoke to him last in the spring of '87.
Were you gone in the spring of '87?
Yeah, I was traveling.
Much of it.
I was traveling.
Did you still call when you were traveling?
Yes.
And, upon your return in the summer of '87, then '88 and '89, did you speak to him on the phone when you weren't living in the same place with him?
Yes.
And during the fall of '86, you said you spoke to him a lot. Is that correct?
Right.
Was there any particular reason why you were speaking to him more often then?
Yes.
Why was that?
Because my mother was having problems.
What kind of problems? Was your brother relating to you the problems your mother was having?
Yes.
And what was he telling you about what was happening with your mother?
Objection, hearsay.
State of mind, Your Honor.
All right, it's not being received for the truth of what was said, but just to reflect the state of mind of the witness as to information he received.
He was telling me that he was constantly, I would say, hysterical times, crying, very nervous, continually telling me about my mom's sometimes problems with my dad, mostly just her own rages and problems with alcohol. Times he couldn't talk to her. She was just spaced out. He would tell me bizarre things. One time when he found blood on her sheets in her bedroom,
Whoa.
we talked about that and what that could be. Her going through his things.
What do you mean her going through his things?
He would just find his bedroom in a way that somebody had gone through it. He just seemed very concerned. I felt extremely bad that I was far away and that I couldn't be there. And
Why? Why did you feel badly you were far away and couldn't be there?
because it seemed like he needed me. And we had always been emotionally there for each other. And I seemed far away.
During this period of time between 1986 and 1989, did you fly back to Los Angeles to see your family often?
I did.
How often?
In the fall, I flew back several times. I can't really say how many times. And it just changed. I mean, I was there quite a bit in the spring because I was in and out traveling. Was not there as frequently in the summer of '87. And then once I started school, I used to fly back very often.
And would your father fly into New Jersey periodically while you were living there?
He would fly in as often as I would fly out there. He would just be at my Aunt Terry's suddenly. He had lots of business in New York and different areas, so he was there. You know, I expected him anytime, continually.
And did your mother accompany him sometimes?
Sometimes.
During the periods of time when you were in the presence of your mother and father rather than talking to them on the phone, I think you described that there was a change in their relationship. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what changes did you observe?
Objection, Vegas time.
During the period from 1986 to 1989, did you observe a pattern of change, if I can go back, Your Honor, let me start again. During the period of 1986 to 1989, did your parents' relationship appear to be very different than it was before that time?
Yes.
And what were the changes that you saw in their relationship?
Pretty dramatic change. She was, you know, when I said before, with basically them seeming more like a couple, at times holding hands and him being very polite to her. But the bigger change was just my dad being very how to describe. She seemed very out of control, and as she had throughout my life, but here it was much more open, and she was very sarcastic, and she would attack him verbally, and he would just take it, and I could tell that he was tense. I wouldn't say that they were a happy couple. He seemed very tense, and he just continually took it and tried to placate her and just.
What did you think about that? Did you think he had become just some henpecked husband? That he was tolerating this, or he didn't care that she was yelling at him? Or did you understand what was going on?
I felt it was because of Louise and because of his. He had just chosen he needed to keep the marriage together. And that's what I felt. He was going to do whatever it took to keep the marriage together. And my mother seemed to know that. And she basically could do what she wanted.
When you were younger, you've testified before that there were things that your mother did to you and your brother that you felt wouldn't have happened when your father was around, when you were younger.
Right.
Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
So did you believe your father could set some limits on your mother's behavior when you were younger?
Yes.
Did you believe that he could set limits on your mother's behavior from this period from 1986 to 1989?
No.
State of mind again, Your Honor.
All right, it'll be received only for the witness's state of mind and for no other purpose.
And how did that make you feel with regard to your mother and what she could do?
It was frightening because I really did rely on my dad to keep her in check to some degree. She just, seeing her attack him in public was something unbelievable. And she was extremely unhappy suicidal. And I was incredibly concerned. I was concerned for my brother who was actually in the house. And
Did you ever hear her threaten to kill herself?
yes,
And when was that? Was it just once, or were there more than one occasion?
she was threatening suicide for a long period of time, pretty much all the way through those years. And she would threaten to take everybody with her.
How did she threaten to take everybody with her? What would she say?
She would threaten to poison herself and everybody, meaning my dad and Erik and myself.
When did she make these threats to poison herself and everybody else?
In 1987, and then in Beverly Hills,
What house were you living in 1987?
in the Calabasas
That's crazy.
house, the rental house.
Do you have specific memories of those conversations in that house?
I remember the screaming and the threatening, and my dad saying that he didn't trust her, and to the point of, at times, refusing to eat the food that she had served, and that we actually would leave.
How would that happen, that he would refuse to eat the food that was served?
He would just suddenly, right before the meal was about to be served, tell Erik and I that we were going out to eat. And my mom would, the time I remember there, my mom would be furious. And basically he just said, "I don't trust you." And he wouldn't say any more than that. And I would ask my dad why he felt, it was crazy because there were days, obviously we ate at the house, but there were just some days when my dad felt she might do something based on the way she was acting that day or things they had said. He wouldn't tell me, but that's what I figured. So we would all leave.
So if you're keeping track, we have an instance where Jose threatened to kill Lyle if Lyle ever kind of spoke up to him again. Remember, that was during a tennis practice when Jose was I guess trying to direct him. I can't remember exactly what happened, but basically Lyle had enough, and so he said no, and he basically was defiant in front of the coach, and so embarrassed Jose, and so Jose told him to get into like the back of the car, what have you, and then I guess knocked him out, right? Like punched him in the face, I think. And then told him, if you ever do that again, I'll kill you. So we have that. And now we have this instance of Kitty threatening to kill herself and everyone else with poison. So it's not, this is, I'm sure the jury has probably taken notice that there are instances that are alleged, by the defendants, by at least particularly Lyle, specifically, where he says that his parents have both threatened to end his life at some point. Now there was also a question that I think I didn't save, having to do with. Oh yeah, just because. Didn't he testify earlier that towards 1989, they seemed like a happier couple, or was that just everyone else who talked about that period? I can't remember if it was Lyle who said that they were happier, or if he specified that they were happier in public. Like this was like in front of family and other people, whenever they would kind of like visit with people, or what. I can't remember specifically. But other people definitely testified to this. Like Aunt Terry testified to this. I think other aunts, uncles, cousins, basically other people in the family testified to how they were suddenly so lovey-dovey and happy. And, Jose was like, "Oh, do you want this? Do you want that?" Kind of sort of like serving her in a sense, definitely being nicer to Kitty for sure. Whereas before he would make fun of her and do all this kind of stuff. So that it seems like that was the change. You know, everybody else kind of figured like I think it was Aunt Marta, maybe Aunt Terry. One of them had said, you know, I thought maybe it was the California air that changed it. But according to Lyle, it's not that. It's that she now had information that she was using against Jose and basically threatening to leave him or to, you know, end her life and end his life in the process. And so that was what he was trying to do to hold this marriage together. Now, there also was a question from earlier from Debbie Faison Cook. When there's a break, can you explain objection foundation and explain how you lay a foundation if it's not too much trouble? Thanks. Yeah. So basically what you're doing as the attorney in either direct examination or cross-examination of any witness is you are methodically kind of working your way through the story, right? And so it's kind of hard to do it without sort of like having a very specific example, but basically laying a foundation is making sure that you've followed through the progression of like how someone would know something. Where there's an objection that comes forward that is a proper objection for a foundation is where they kind of skip some of those steps. Basically, like to say, you know, if the question was, you know, Lyle, you know, something along the lines of like Lyle and his relationship with Stacy, and that relationship ended. And then that relationship, you know, ended because of not because of a tennis tournament, but, you know, or was that the one afterwards, Jamie? I can't remember. But basically, like, if there's certain reasoning behind, you know, something happening and information that he would know. I'm really not explaining this very well right now. I'm so sorry. You have to work through the progression of like how he would know something before you can reveal that he knows something. You know, oh, here's an example. Anytime that there are conversations between Kitty and Jose, they have to lay a little bit of foundation to show, you know, were you ever in the room when they were talking about something like that? Because it places him in the room and it basically, it gives the source of how he would know this information in the first place. That's laying a foundation. There are other examples of it, you know, like, you know, if somebody received a letter from someone and that letter was talking about X, you know, like there are ways of basically building the progression of essentially how someone would know something. Sorry, that was very long-winded and very windy. So I hope that was clear enough to you guys to explain it. And I hope I didn't just like confuse you guys further, because that would be the opposite of what I want to do here.
So how would you know when it was okay to eat the food?
We would just rely on my dad.
You said that you didn't feel that your dad now could set the limits for your mother or control her behavior like she had before. Did that have any effect on how she behaved toward you? Did it change? Did how she behaved toward you change?
Yes.
In what way?
In the way that she was much more threatening it was usually connected to killing herself also, but she was just she had a much more bigger role in my life really than my dad did even.
How about feelings that she had toward you? Did she express them differently during this period of time?
I wouldn't say that they were different. She expressed the same hatred, feeling of me being the major problem in her life, but it was more frequent, and it would happen in front of my dad. And
Had she ever expressed in front of your dad The fact that she hated you or you'd ruined her life? Had she ever said those things in front of your dad before?
No,
And was she saying them during this period of time?
frequently.
And what would he do?
He would do nothing.
Wow.
When she's saying these things to you, that she hates you and that you've ruined her life, how did you feel?
I felt just confused. And,
Did it hurt?
Yeah, it hurt.
Did you told us the other day that when your brother told you that he'd found a suicide letter, you talked to your mother and told her to leave your dad and to come live with you. Is that correct?
Yes.
Why did you do that when she had behaved this way toward you all your life?
Because I wanted her to know that I felt like all the things she had done to me and just our bad relationship, I thought she was suicidal, and I wanted to help her, and I wanted her to know that it wasn't that I loved my dad more, that I loved her and my brother loved her. And if she seemed like she wanted to stay in Princeton, that seemed to make her happy, and that we would, in a divorce, side with her and stay in Princeton. And that, because that seemed to be what was causing her to want to kill herself, was the divorce. And I wanted her to know that her family would be with her.
Did you write her a letter in July of 1987 when you were in Madrid?
Yeah.
Your Honor, I'd like to mark this as next in order. 240.
And also, sorry, earlier I was talking about the foundation thing, and WP is on Cook, so you have to ask if you saw an argument before they can ask what happened. Yeah. Basically, like because otherwise, how would this person know this information that they're testifying to? We have to make sure that the information is good information, right? It's not just plucked out of the air. It's not just, this person supposing something. That there's good reason for them knowing the information that they are testifying to. So yeah.
245, I believe. The letter, the envelope and its contents. May I approach you? Mr. Menendez, I'm showing you the envelope we've marked as 245. I'd ask you to recognize that.
It's a letter I sent to my mother.
And is there a postmark on it?
July 14, 1987,
And where is it from?
Madrid.
And inside is a one-page letter with writing on both sides. Do you recognize that letter?
Yes.
And would you read for us just the first few lines? The first 6 lines.
Hi, Mom. How are you? I hope you're all right and hanging in there. I often worry about you. You're the only mother I have and would want. Made any new friends? Done anything interesting? I hope so. I'm all right over here. Cole and I traveled.
And then it goes on and you talk about your trip. Is that correct?
Right. Thanks.
And would you read the last paragraph?
I hope everything's all right at home with Dad and Erik. I miss you all. I will write very soon again, so check the mailbox. Love you, Mom, Lyle.
When you wrote that letter to her, were those true feelings?
Yes.
Did you love your mom?
Yes.
Were you worried about her?
Yes.
Did you continue to try to reach out to her during this period of time?
I tried a few times and tried to let her know that we loved her, but she never acknowledged that.
You told us the other day about an incident in which she showed you the pills she was taking. Do you remember that?
Yes.
When did that conversation take place?
And my Aunt Terry's, and I'm not exactly sure when.
Do you know what year? Can you remember?
1989, I believe.
But sometime after they moved to California and you were still living back in New Jersey, is that correct?
Right.
And when she told you that she was taking these 13 pills a day, why did she say she was taking them?
She said she was taking them because she needed them to get through the day.
What did you think that meant?
That she was having trouble controlling herself and in a lot of pain, and that these pills were helping.
And did she tell you why she was in so much pain?
She said that it was my fault because I was stressing my dad out.
Did that make you feel good or bad?
It made me feel very bad and sorry and wanting to understand her. It was a very strange conversation.
And you knew about Louise at that time, didn't you?
Yes.
Did you ever say to her, Mom, you know you're upset about Louise, it's not my fault?
No.
Why not?
Because it was an unusual conversation. Just
Unusual in what way?
first time she ever acknowledged that she had a problem to me, and I had known, the severe problems for my whole life, and it's the first time she came to me and showed me, an example of how bad it was, and but she couldn't acknowledge what the problem was.
During this period of time from 1986 to 1989, did it seem like your parents knew a lot about your life?
And I think they knew almost everything about what was going on in my life.
And is this partly because of all the telephone conversations and seeing each other so much and you being asked all these questions?
Partly, yeah.
And is it partly because of something else?
Yes.
Did you later find out that they were doing something that would give them more information about you and your brother?
Yes, the phones were tapped, my brother's phones and the house phones
How did you find that out?
afterwards.
How did you find it out? Did you hear something?
Yes, I saw the tape recorder plugged into the wall, and I also listened to some of the tapes of conversations between my brother and I, and my brother and his friends, anyone who had called the house.
You talked about the fact that during this period of time, your father seemed to have lost control over your mother. Is
Yes.
that correct?
Yes.
Had he become somebody who was weak and frightened and had no power?
No, my dad was never weak.
Would your dad talk about his business dealings during this period of time, 1986 to 1989?
Yes.
And what information did you have about what was happening with the company that he had taken over? Had he done a good job with it or a bad job?
Oh, he'd done a remarkable job. The company was a shambles. He came in and fired a great number of people and cleaned up the company's act, and very aggressively took it to be a profitable company. And he was making millions of dollars doing this, and they was making everybody money, and it was just getting bigger and bigger. And everybody thought he could do no wrong.
Was he kind-hearted in his business dealings?
Objection, lack of foundation, called for business.
Sustained.
Would he talk to you about the things he did in business?
Okay. So there's the foundation objection. So, asking him about business, and then asking him, was he a fair kind of person or a kind of person in his, in his business, or was he more of an aggressive kind of person? And the objection was lack of foundation. And that was sustained, and that was properly sustained, because she has to put him in the room where he's, talking with his employees, right? She has previously talked about, or she has had him previously talk about, the summer internship essentially that he did, working for his father, but she's got to do it again for this in this questioning here. Either have him talk about either that summertime, him observing the way that he was with them again, or was there another time that he, was ever in the office and saw him and the way that he related to his employees. So that's how that foundation objection comes up.
Yes.
And did you have an opportunity to observe how he operated in business from the time you worked at the company?
Yes.
Was he kind-hearted in his business?
No, he was ruthless.
Objection, irrelevant.
Objection sustained. The answer is stricken.
Would he talk to you about squeezing out smaller businessmen?
Yes.
Did he talk to you about doing business with people that other people were frightened of?
Objection, leaving.
Sustained.
Yeah.
Did he talk to you about the people he did business with?
Yes.
What kind
And
of people?
what kind of people was he
There you
doing
go.
business with?
Well, he did business with
People that other people were afraid of?
some people that other executives were, according to him, too afraid to do business with. And his
So this is also one of those things where, like, you can end up, so she asked, just to sort of frame this for you. So she originally asked, did your father work with other people that other people were too afraid to work with? And that drew a question of leading. In other words, is she basically just sort of spoon feeding him the answers, and he just needs to say yes, or no, or, if it's a very simple answer that she's looking for, and she's just kind of painting the picture for him, that is leading, and you're not supposed to do that on direct examination. But this is where it's helpful to have a witness that is listening very carefully to what the attorney is asking. So, and listening to, the objections and everything, is paying good attention, because of the way that he was paying attention, regardless of the fact that she drew the objection, it was sustained, it was properly sustained by the judge, in my opinion. Then she re-asked the question, but in a different way, a much more open way. So what kind of people did he work with? I mean, obviously he knows where she wants him to go, even though she can't technically ask that question on the record. So it's like, it's yes, the objection is properly drawn. Yes, it was properly sustained, but she still kind of gets the answer that she needs from him because of the fact that he's paying attention. So it's funny to see that when you can predict exactly what his answer is going to be, basically, because he's like, well, he would work with people that other executives were kind of too afraid to work with. It's just a fun example of, like, how, drawing an objection and having that be sustained is not the end of the world. Sometimes.
His connections allowed him to do business with, like Morris Levy, who was a guy that owned a chain of video stores in Boston area. And my understanding was he was a gangster. So my dad flew out to meet him at the hotel because he was ordered by the court, because he was going to prison, to get rid of his assets, this guy. And nobody had enough courage to go out and meet with him and discuss a deal. My dad flew out personally.
Did your dad seem to be pretty brave in terms of the people that he did business with?
Objection reading.
How did your dad seem with regard to the people he did business with?
He seemed fearless. He talked about doing business with Barry Gordy, other, he had conversations about Noel Bloom.
Sorry, I'm interrupting here. James Lord, that's really funny. You might need to explain video store. So back in the day, long before streaming platforms ever existed, long before DVDs even existed, there were stores where you could buy or rent a video. Okay, let's move on. That was funny.
Noel Bloom, and he talked. He basically had confrontations with these people in which he felt that they were afraid of him, and he was not afraid of them.
And these are the stories he would tell you?
Yes.
Now, in terms of the company, you said that it had been a shambles and then he took it over and it was doing extremely well. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did he talk to you about whether he was taking compensation in money or stock, or how he was doing that?
He was getting a salary, but he chose to take most of his compensation, almost all of it really, in stock, the bulk of it, and would continue to do so.
And while he was in charge of the business, had the stock gone up in value considerably?
Yeah, it went from being essentially not worth anything to, it was in the 20s or something. He constantly monitored it.
And during the time that you were working at the company or hearing him talk about it, who seemed to be the one responsible for the increase in value in the stock?
My dad was responsible for everything. Everybody worked hard, but it was essentially just like a little, it was a company that he used to purchase other companies, to make deals, platform for his deal making. And
was he going to continue to work there for a period of time?
He was going to work there a couple more years.
What was the expectation with regard to what was going to happen in the next couple of years in terms of money?
Objection, lack of foundation.
Sustained.
Did he talk to you about where the company was going and why he was going to work a couple more years?
Yes.
And why was he going to work a couple more years?
Well, he was really tired of working with the company and in business, but the money just kept getting bigger and bigger, and especially the next contract was going to be real big money, he kept saying, and he just felt like he had to go another couple years until he could get the kind of money he needed so he could do what he really wanted, which was to go into politics and move out of the state.
Okay, did he talk to you about going into politics?
Yes.
And where was he going to move? You said he was going to move out of state. Where was he going to move?
Florida.
And was this just some sort of general dream, someday I'd like to go in politics, or did he seem to have a very specific plan?
No, it was very specific. He even had the place that he wanted to buy in mind.
The place he wanted to buy for what? To live in or to work in? Or
To live.
what kind of place did he want to buy?
It was a little peninsula that had like 7 other houses on the compound, and one for my brother eventually when he got married and so on, and one for me, my grandmother, both my Aunt Terry, my Aunt Terry's family, Terry and Carlos, himself, and I'm not sure who else he was going to have live there, but he was going to have everybody on the compound, and he was going to base himself out of there.
Now, had he gone looking for real estate? I mean, had he actually found something like
Yeah,
that?
this is what he found, and he discussed it, with my grandmother, Terry and Carlos, and
Crazy.
that's what he wanted to do.
Crazy.
And so he was going to buy.
Yeah. CJ Drake, I was thinking the same thing. Epstein vibes, right? Like Epstein Island, except it's a peninsula. Ugh. So much weirdness. So much weird.
This compound, and when you got married, you were going to live next door.
Right.
And your brother was going to live in the house down the street or whatever.
That's what I guessed, yeah.
How did you feel about that?
A whole lot of nope.
Um,
How about a whole lot of nope?
I didn't really feel one way or the other. I kind of was thinking about school and tennis, and I would just live where my dad lived.
Oh,
And that was, it sounded like a incredible place, and that was fine.
And when your dad was talking about going into politics, was he also talking about you going into politics?
Yes.
And in the summer of 1987, did he make a decision about your personal appearance that was based on the idea that you were going to go into politics?
Yes.
Is this something that's hard for you to talk about?
Yes.
Can you tell me what the decision is your dad? Well, let me go back. Had you started losing some hair earlier in your life?
Oh.
Yes.
How old were you when you started noticing that you were losing some hair?
I think 14.
And did some people tease you about it?
Yes.
And who is it that teased you about it?
Mostly tennis coach. Occasionally someone at school would say something about it. I was losing very little hair, but still was disturbing to me.
And did you talk to your dad about this?
No, not back then.
You weren't bald at 14 or 15, were you?
No.
So you were just losing a small amount of hair?
Yes.
And in the summer of 1987, did you and your dad have a conversation about the state of your hair?
Yes.
And what was that conversation?
He felt that he wanted me to go into politics, and that I would be going to Princeton in the fall, and that's where I would meet a lot of my contacts. And he felt that I was going to, even though it wasn't very noticeable at that point, that I would probably continue to lose my hair, and that it would be a good idea to maybe right now, before I meet these people at Princeton, to get a hairpiece.
And did you do that?
I did.
How old were you?
I think I was 19.
And what did they have to do to give you a hairpiece?
I had lots of hair, so they shaved my head.
Your whole head?
Just the area where the hairpiece went on.
And what area is that?
Essentially just around the crown area and all the way back.
And did you get a hairpiece then?
Yes.
And are you wearing it today?
Yes.
How did you feel about getting a hairpiece at 19?
I was very worried. Mostly for superficial reasons like dating and stuff. I had a girlfriend at the time, and I was glad for that because I was concerned about dating and just jokes, people finding out. But my dad was pretty insistent that it was the right thing to do, so I did it.
Did you tell your brother?
No, but I think he knew I had something done.
Something done like what?
I don't know, some kind of, I mean, he couldn't tell I had a hairpiece, but he could, my hair was a little fuller because I wasn't losing my hair in the front. It was kind of like in the back, and across the middle. I just obviously had fuller looking hair, and he commented on it a couple times. And I didn't tell him anything.
During this period of time, the 1986 to 1989 period, did your dad continue to have a lot of control over your life?
Yes.
And did he continue to have control in a very forceful way?
Yes.
And in the spring of 1987, did you have a coach named Robbie Klaus?
Yes.
And did Robbie Klaus have a conversation with you about something your dad had said to him?
Yes.
Where did this conversation take place?
In Florida at a tennis tournament.
And what did Robbie Klaus tell you?
That my dad had threatened his life for a suggestion that I become a tennis pro and maybe not postpone school. Robbie said he'd never said that to him, but that my dad said he was hearing that.
When you say Robbie said he'd never said that to him, what do you mean? Robbie told you he'd never told your dad what?
He'd never made that suggestion to my dad.
Oh, that you drop out of school to go on the tour?
Right.
Okay.
But he just said that my dad had threatened his life with my mother sitting at the table. And he was petrified. And he basically wanted to let me know that because he was concerned for me. And he thought my dad was totally crazy. He was afraid.
Did you tell him, oh, Dad just jokes a lot, don't worry about it?
No, I told him that my dad doesn't joke a lot about those things, and you should just relax and go home, and I'll be all right. And that was the last tournament we were going to do together because he could not coach me anymore. He was just couldn't coach me. He was too afraid.
Well, did you tell him that, that he shouldn't be afraid?
No.
What'd you tell
If
him?
my dad felt that he was suggesting that, and I felt my dad could do something to him, I wasn't sure. So I found it. I didn't know what to think. I just felt that the guy was very shaken by it, and I felt very bad for him, because it was it's humiliating for him also. I just tried to say that that's just the way my dad is, and he should just sort of not coach me. It's fine. It's okay with me. It was a sad meeting, but it was also very tense, and I didn't really say much to him.
How did you feel?
So, and by the way, this has all been corroborated on the stand by Coach Robbie Klaus, who testified earlier, and he testified about this interaction that he had with with Jose and with Kitty, and he testified to telling Lyle about this at the tournament, like right before Lyle actually performed. So this is all lining up.
I felt myself. I felt very shaken, shocked. Just I was also, my feelings were more. This is really the first time that I realized that I wasn't going to be doing tennis, even after school. That my dad was going into politics, and obviously, when we discussed the hairpiece, then I knew for sure. But at that point, I had the year off, and he had hired the coach, and we were spending a lot of money traveling around, and he just wanted Robbie to hang out with me till I went back to school. It's basically what was happening.
Did you have a tournament to play right after this competition?
Yes. Yeah, then we had the satellite tournament.
What'd you do?
We had the conversation the night before, and I was just a wreck, and he was, in the same condition, and I just couldn't play. I didn't want to play either. So I played through the first, I think I got through the first set, and then I just told the guy I can't play. And to report the scores, because I knew my dad would verify that I lost or not. So I made sure he reported the scores rather than default. And then when that was it, I just withdrew from the tournament.
Had you ever done that before?
No.
Had you ever seen anybody else ever do that before?
No.
Why didn't you just default? What would happen if your dad found out you defaulted?
Well, I didn't just default unless I had like an injury where I was incapacitated, couldn't play, and my dad saw that. So I had to play. I played injured, I played sick. So I couldn't just default, and he did eventually take my brother to a tournament in that area, I believe for Easter Bowl, and they passed by and they saw the score sheet, and he was able to tell me who had eventually won the tournament.
So he had checked up on you?
Yeah.
Well, what would happen if you just defaulted? What if you said, Dad, I was really upset about your conversation with Robbie, and I couldn't play. Why couldn't you do that?
I didn't do it because we had, he had physically hurt me when I didn't do things his way. And I just felt that he was extremely tense during this whole period of time because of my mother. It just seemed much more volatile than usual. And I wasn't going to really press any issue like that.
You were 19 years old at the time?
Yeah.
You told us that you were suspended from Princeton and then returned in February of 1989. Is that correct?
Yes.
And when you went back to Princeton, was there some arrangement made about the room you were to have?
Yes.
And what kind of room were you supposed to have?
We had requested a single room.
When you say we had requested, did you request it or did somebody else?
So my dad requested a single room, and he had expected that they would grant that, and they usually did, supposedly.
When you got there, was the single room available?
No. I think they had tried to give me a single room, but it was like in a 7-man area where the 7 people lived, and somebody had just moved out that lived in a single room in that little area. So I guess that was supposed to be mine. But since I was coming in mid-year, the boys had rearranged their rooms and somebody was already in there.
What did you do when you found out the room you were supposed to have wasn't available?
I called my dad. And
Why'd you call your dad?
situations like that, I always call my dad immediately. It's better than him finding out another way.
How old
And
were
he-
you?
Was 21.
So you called your dad and said the room I'm supposed to have is not available.
Right.
Did your dad give you some advice?
Yeah, he said, I explained to him the situation, and he said that obviously was supposed to be my room. And the boy was off on a crew training trip with the crew team. So my dad told me just move the guy's stuff out.
Did you want to do that?
I told him I think we should wait till the kid came back and maybe I could work it out or something, because if I just move the guy's stuff out, I'm not going to get along in that room. But my dad was pretty upset that they had put me in a 7-man room to begin with. He told me just move the guy's stuff out and call me when you're done.
Why didn't you say, Dad, I don't want to do that? They're all going to hate me if I do that. I don't want to do it.
Yeah, like if you're there to network, so to speak, like that was Jose's, attitude about what Princeton was not for the education, but for the networking. How is that supposed to help with that goal? Just doesn't make any sense.
I told him that it wasn't a good idea. I didn't think, but I couldn't just. I just never said no.
So did you move the stuff out?
I moved the stuff out, and the other kids had the reaction I thought they would have. They were very upset and wouldn't talk to me. And when the guy came back, he moved my stuff out and put his stuff back in, and moved my stuff into the hall. I don't want to have a problem with him, so I just stayed in the hall, and I actually slept in the hall, had a bed there, and I just lived in the hallway between the rooms, the 7-man rooms.
For how long?
I'm not exactly sure how long, almost 2 weeks. I think it was about 2 weeks.
And did something happen then?
My dad found out. I don't know how, but he found out. And
Found out that you were in the hall?
yes,
Okay.
and he was furious that I was in the hall. And basically didn't want to talk about it. Told me to go down, talk to the head of the college, and demand a new room.
Did you want to do that?
I wasn't happy in the hall, but I didn't. I had already checked into it, sort of, and asked if they had any available rooms, explained to them my situation at the housing place. And they said there was nothing they could do, that I was supposed to be in there, and I just have to get along. So I thought the best thing to do was just to stay in the hall until we came to an arrangement, because eventually I would get along better with everybody and we could figure something out. My dad didn't want me to go to the housing people. He told me to talk to the head of the college and you tell him that you need a room. And so I went and I requested time with him and I asked him. And they found me a room far away from where I originally was supposed to be in the college I was in. But it was a room that I guess somebody had moved out of or didn't show up or something like that.
Was that okay with you to be in that room?
Yes. And I moved all my things in there. And I called my dad and told him that it was great. I found a room. And he I thought that was fine and was good. And then eventually, at some point, within a day or so, found out where the room was.
Your dad found out, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
And was really upset again that I had allowed myself to be moved out of the area where I was supposed to live.
Oh, jeez.
And said that I obviously couldn't handle the situation. He was going to call himself. That made me real nervous. I wasn't sure who he was going to call or what he was going to say, but like the next day, I was called in to talk to the head of the college.
And what kind of mood was the head of the college in?
He said that my dad was an asshole and that nobody had ever talked to him like that before, and that he had a new room for me. And he was very hostile to me.
How did you feel?
I felt like semester was not starting out very well, and really wasn't surprising to me that the guy was in that mood. That's why I was nervous to begin with when he called. I just tried to tell the guy that, you know, I didn't have anything to do with it. My dad, I liked the other room, and he said that I was just a chip off the old block, and I was spoiled, and I just wanted a new room. So I had my old man call and curse him out.
Had you had your father call him?
No.
Did you want your father to call him?
No.
Did you want to stay in that other room that you had been given?
I wanted to stay in the other room just so I could get on with the semester, and it was a good room. And so Dad was able to get me a double-sized room right next to where I was supposed to be.
So you were back around all of the people that you'd been around with in the beginning when you'd had the trouble by moving the guy's stuff out?
Yes.
Were they friendly to you?
They were not friendly to me.
Were you happy your dad had interfered in that way?
No, I was just complaining to my Aunt Terry that my whole situation at school was so bad that I just would prefer to live with her. And
Did you tell your dad he'd made the situation worse?
no. I told him the room was great, you know, and I was settled and there was no more problems and he didn't have to call anymore.
Why didn't you tell him you made things worse?
He just didn't tell my dad he was doing the wrong thing. My dad was a brutal guy. He did what he wanted. He was a very, even little problems like this, he had very severe solutions, and they almost always worked. And if once a problem got to his attention, he handled it in his way. And there wasn't any, you should have done it this way, or I didn't appreciate that, or he'd just tell you to. I mean, I never even said that, so I don't know what he would say, but that would have been weak, and I wouldn't have done that.
It would have been weak if you said, you're hurting other people's feelings, you're making other people not like me. That would have been something you couldn't admit to?
Yes, because I was not supposed to be concerned with what other people thought about me. I'm supposed to focus on my goals. And he didn't really think that the kids at that school mattered anyway. It was really just the kids' fathers, because my dad was going to take me far beyond whatever these kids could achieve.
Again, like how would he expect Lyle to have access to these kids' fathers if the kids hated them? It just makes zero sense. It's crazy.
But he felt that a great number of the kids were there because their dads were powerful, wealthy, connected. And that's where the help was going to come from, the contacts. So, get along with the kids insofar as you can, the fathers will help you out then. And that's why I was at that school.
For the contacts?
Yeah.
You met Donovan Goodrow in February of '89, is that correct?
Yes.
Ah, yes. Donovan.
Did you two become very close friends?
He was my closest friend ever.
How much time did you spend with him? Did you see him every day?
I saw him. We basically spent all day together and all night since he stayed in my dorm room. And
had he had an apartment when you first met him?
yes.
And did something happen with his living situation?
Yes.
And did you then let him stay in what you said was a two-man room?
he stayed there, or when I stayed at Aunt Terry's, which was more often than not, he stayed with me there.
And you said you spent all day with him. Was he a
Yes.
student at Princeton?
No.
Did he claim to be a student at Princeton?
He said that he was supposed to go in the fall and that he had taken time off. He said that he had transferred from junior college. And it was a complicated story, but he had transferred from junior college and they wanted him to wait till the fall. No, he wanted to wait till the fall so he could get to know the area, and since he had driven across the country in his truck. And so he was working in restaurants there, and he wanted to sort of stay on campus a lot and meet the kids, and that way he could start in the fall. And he was older than the rest of the kids as I was, so we had that bond, and we became very close.
Did you want him to be a close part of your life?
Yes, I thought this could be a friend I could have for my life. And
And if you were going to have someone who was going to be a friend for your life, would he have to meet someone's approval?
yes,
Whose approval would he have to meet?
he'd have to meet Dad's approval.
And from the time you first met him, did you begin working with him to help him be a person who could meet your dad's approval?
Yes, I tried to, my dad had always said that I couldn't really have close friends. It wouldn't work out for lots of reasons. One of them being that they weren't trained in the same way that I was. They weren't brought up in the same way. And so I knew a lot of the things that my dad respected. And so I basically, I really wanted him to, I wanted him to be a part of my life. And in order for that to happen, he had to be accepted in the world I had with my dad. And so I went ahead and, I helped him memorize all the phrases my dad had me memorize.
Now, when you say all the phrases, are these phrases out of a particular book?
Yes, the ones I repeated the other day and a lot more. That
What book are we talking about?
The Greatest Salesman in the World,
By.
Og Mandino.
And so this was the book that your dad had used with you to
Yes,
train you,
yes,
or one of the books?
yes.
And so did you begin training Donovan?
Yes.
How did you train him?
We just went over and over and over the passages. I give him an understanding of why my dad had me read them, what they meant to him. He spent his time when I was in class, if he didn't go to class with me, memorizing them. And, he was very willing and excited about it. And we had lots of long talks about my dad and what he would admire and what he would not. I helped him. I gave him a good idea of the way my dad spoke and not to be rambling on in his presence, and how to get an indication of when the atmosphere changed in the room and he would want him to be silent, because my dad was very fiercely critical of people, and especially my friends. I had never had a friend that even came close to his approval. But Donovan was very bright and very excited about this, so I thought it could work.
What did you mean when you said to be able to sense the change in the atmosphere in the room?
He, from the way that my dad looked at me, I could tell if he wanted me to stop talking, if he wanted me to express myself better. He was kind of disgusted, or if he was pleased what I was saying to other people. By the way his hands move, if he wanted you to stop, or obviously there were all the signals for tennis, but even outside of tennis, there were all kinds of cues, nodding of his head, just the way he said my name, for me to act in certain ways. And I wanted Donovan to sort of get used to that, because if in fact I was going to be working with my dad through my life, and I wanted him to be a part of that, he would have to get used to my dad's behavior, which was very difficult. And that's why in my dad's business, he had brought people from New York who had gotten used to his behavior. And so I worked with him in this way, and he seemed to understand what I was talking about.
At some point, did you bring him to California to meet your dad?
Yes.
And did you have particularly intensive training sessions with him before the dinner with your dad?
Yes. We prepared for the dinner talks, which were going to be the most grueling part. And I didn't think, I knew he had never had dinner conversations like this before. And I just wanted to prepare him as best I could.
How did you prepare him? What did you do?
We just I played my dad basically and tried to grill Donovan in the way I thought my dad would, with lots of sharp questions and going back constantly to the things he had said. And we spent like an hour or so doing this, and Donovan answering the questions, and I would explain to him how to do it the way I did, with very short answers, very polite, not open yourself up to, being attacked by him.
All right, let's take our recess, and ladies and gentlemen, we'll resume at 20 minutes to the hour. Don't discuss this case among yourselves or with anyone else, and we'll resume at 20 minutes to the hour.
Mr. Menendez, when we left off, we were talking about the preparations for the dinner with your father. Do you remember?
Yes.
And did you subsequently have dinner with your father, with Donovan?
Yes.
And what happened?
We had dinner, and he grilled him in the way that I had told Donovan he would. And
What kinds of things was he asking him?
he was asking him mostly personal questions in the beginning, like where he was from, why he was going to Princeton, why he wasn't going that semester, what were his reasons for waiting, did he have any family, what did his dad do, just lots of different personal questions. And then wanted to know what he thought about life. What was his basic philosophy of life? What do you want to do with his life? He was going to go to this particular school. What was that going to do for him? And he would be jumping back and forth between subjects, like I had expected. And Donovan didn't do too well.
How did you feel while this was going on?
I was very nervous, and Donovan was just pale from being nervous. And
Why were you nervous?
because I thought that he wasn't going to do well, and my dad was going to tell me that I should get rid of this guy as a friend, because he was wishy-washy. And Donovan was a very soft guy, and I knew my dad would sense that right away, and that would be a strike against him. And so Donovan really needed to be forceful in these conversations, and he really wasn't doing that as well as I had hoped. And basically my dad said to me afterwards that this guy seems real weak. And
How did you feel when he said that?
I felt like he was going to tell me to stop hanging out with him.
You were 21. Is that right?
Right.
Why couldn't you tell him, I like him, I can pick my own friends?
Because you just didn't do that to Jose.
For the same reasons I said before, just didn't say that to my dad. And he really didn't say that to my mom either, but for different reasons. My mother would just get enraged and completely go off. My dad would be very short with you and just dismiss you. And I needed my dad, and my relationship with him was strained and a lot of painful things, but also he was there to help me in my life, and he kept me up. He kept me going at times when I was very depressed or down or distracted. And nothing seemed really worth it to press the issue on to the point of, my dad could just summarily dismiss me from his life at some point. And I didn't want that to happen.
Why not?
I loved my dad. And I wanted to be a part of his life.
Even though he was going to be making all the decisions for you?
I figured there would come a time when I would make a lot more decisions.
Was he going to pick where you lived?
Assuming we went to Florida and we did what he wanted to do, yeah.
Was he going to pick what career you had in the future?
It was going to be political. It might be business oriented also.
But he was going to pick it.
Right.
Was he going to pick who you married?
He might. He would.
Was it okay with you that he make those decisions for you?
He was conditioned for
That's
it.
just the way it was. I mean, it's hard to explain, but in my, there was my mom and my dad, and my mom had so much control, especially in the later years, through just her own ability to inflict, just attack people, or, she had her threats, she had her whole, that's how she controlled the things around her, was basically scaring people because of her behavior. And my dad just, it was like, he controlled everything around him in his whole life. And very rarely did I see him disturbed or anything. He just seemed like he was always in control, and he was incredibly successful. And I wanted to be a part of his life. And from early on, he was always there. And I just, neither me nor any of my friends could imagine a time when I would just be, my dad wouldn't be there.
Did you think you could make it on your own?
I really didn't.
Why not?
Because you weren't set up for it. You weren't trained
Just
for
from
it.
working with my dad at the business and failing so miserably, and really in tennis, not ever.
I wonder if that was part of a manipulation tactic too, by Jose, to say like, okay, here's what the real world's going to be like. Here's what the world is without your Papa Jose. Is, you go to work and you do this kind of work. What better way to make Lyle feel like the corporate world, the business world, is a scary, intimidating place if he doesn't have his father's help? And what better way to hamstring your kid? So it seems like all of that was intended to just make him need Jose.
Ever reaching the levels that we had set for me. In school, I felt completely inadequate. I was not anywhere near as smart as the kids at Princeton, and I could not do their work. I just really felt like I was way, way below what my dad could do. He did things sort of by magic, and I struggled at the slightest thing. And he saw that, and we would talk about that and the different flaws and weaknesses and work on them. But I never really got to a point where I felt comfortable saying, "Hey, Dad, let me do this."
Did you spend a lot of time talking with your dad about your flaws and weaknesses?
We talked about them, very regularly.
How much time did you spend talking about your strengths?
We didn't really talk about strengths except in tennis. I had some strengths, and we would try to pattern my game around that. But in life, I was pretty much weak and oversensitive, in his opinion, just the whole thing with my girlfriends. And, like with Christy, I was going to keep the baby and marry her. And these things were just stunning to him, that I could be so stupid as to throw my life away on things like that could be corrected. So, I continually had these problems, and we talked about them regularly. And I sort of agreed that I was going to have a hard time in the future, because I was never going to be able to control the business meetings anywhere near the way he did. I don't think I could inspire people the way he could, and control them and get them to focus on what he wanted. He was something brilliant.
And were you something brilliant?
No, I wanted to think that, and there were times when he told me that I was.
So there were times he told you were brilliant?
Mm-hmm.
Very often?
No, I really remember one time at my Aunt Terry's, when we had a big, long conversation about these issues, and about the fact that I could never be what he wanted, and I could never be as good as he could. Even if somehow I managed to get all these qualities and do what he did, I still wouldn't have started from the same place. I would have started at a school like Princeton, not an immigrant with nothing. And so I talked to him about coping with that.
And this talk at your Aunt Terry's, when was this?
This was in spring of '89, around Easter.
And were some decisions made about your future at that time, in terms of what the
Yes.
expectations were?
Yeah, we made a lot of decisions in that conversation in the basement.
How long did that last, that conversation?
A few hours, like 3 hours.
This is spring of '89, so you're 21.
Right.
And you said some decisions were made?
Yes.
Is this about your future?
Yes.
And who made these decisions?
My dad made them after discussions with me as to what he felt I could handle. I wanted to transfer out of the school.
Out of Princeton?
Yes.
Into what school?
University of Pennsylvania.
Why did you want to transfer?
Or even UCLA, some school that had business courses. I felt I was really floundering at Princeton to some degree, at least with the grade level that my dad wanted me to get. I couldn't get that. And also I felt, like I had said, that I really was inadequate to do what my dad was doing, and it was making me nervous that I was sort of getting older, and a time would come when he would really press me to take on responsibilities, and I didn't know how I was going to learn these things. And I figured, Princeton has no business courses whatsoever. It's not a trade school in that way. And this University of Pennsylvania or UCLA had the courses, small business courses, corporate courses, things that I could get a grasp or learn something. So I talked to my dad about that it might be a good idea for me to switch, just feeling very insecure about myself, and basically came to an arrangement. I had always thought I was going to graduate school, and he had decided that I wasn't going to go to graduate school anymore. So I didn't need to get the same grades, that all I had to do was pass and get the degree and meet people and, get the contacts. And that was all he wanted out of me for the school. And I could concentrate on my tennis there if I wanted. And So we basically made that deal, and then he in turn would guide me, take care of the business end, and he obviously had money, and he said he was going to have a great deal more money in the future, and he'd be able to finance any business I wanted after I graduated if we wanted to start me out in business before I go into politics. And he hadn't quite worked it out, but basically told me not to worry about it.
It's so sad because if he seems like he had like a genuine interest to learn these things, to learn the more like trade school type of classes, or to take those kind of classes to actually learn about business so that he could become a somebody who is competent in business, you know? So if he actually had that interest, maybe he could have applied himself and actually done homework and all that kind of stuff without relying on his father. Or, you know, even if he was still having his father do most of the work that gets turned in, it's like he still could be interested enough, hopefully, possibly, maybe, to actually learn that stuff. So it's unfortunate because it's like it seems like he actually genuinely could have had a path towards becoming a successful businessman, possibly, right? At the very least, based on his interests. But it seems like aside from that, everything, like no matter what, like even without them killing their parents in this case, he was set up for failure. This was ending with some sort of a train falling off a cliff, right? Like this was not ending up anywhere good anytime soon. It's just it's wild. It's wild, like the lack of forethought that was being put forward in this whole plan as they were planning and scheming and doing all this other stuff. It's crazy.
At school, just pass.
Well, did you feel when you got out of school you were going to be capable of doing these things on your own, or
I didn't, but
were you going to be dependent on him?
I would be dependent on him to a great extent. He kept telling me that business was easy and that it was simple and you just had to go about it a certain way, and that he would teach me later on that I shouldn't be concerned with it now. And so I accepted that.
Okay. Let's go back. We were talking about your relationship with Donovan. After you had the visit with your parents and the talk with your dad, did you and Donovan return to New Jersey?
Yes.
And did you continue to be close with him?
Yes.
And did you continue the same types of talks that you were talking about earlier in terms of philosophy and memorizing things?
Yes.
And at some point in time, did you have a dinner with him that you heard Donovan describe here, a dinner in a Chinese restaurant?
Yes.
And was there some conversation at that dinner about being close and having no secrets?
Yes.
And did Donovan tell you something in that conversation?
Yes.
What did
He
Donovan
was,
tell you?
Objection, hearsay.
Nothing offered for the truth of what was said.
No, it's nothing to do with the truth of the matter.
Objection, irrelevant.
And it goes to state of mind. And it goes to a prior consistent statement.
Right, as to what Mr. Goudreau said, it's not being received for the truth of what was said, just to be part of a conversation that occurred and the state of mind of the witness.
What did Mr. Boudreau tell you?
He told me it was a very, I could tell that something was coming, and he, after some amount of him crying and having a hard time getting out, he told me that he had been molested by his uncle, or I believe it was his uncle, another adult, and he told me a little about that and was crying. And of course,
How did you feel?
I felt very bad for him
Why?
because I knew how it felt.
And did you say something to him?
I told him
Did you want to help him?
I couldn't help him. I just wanted to comfort him and let him know that yeah, he felt that made him lesser and weak, and I wanted to let him know that the same thing had happened. I told him I don't remember exactly what I told him, but I had let him know that the same thing happened to myself and my brother, and that it was okay.
How did you react when you saw him crying and upset?
I don't know if I started crying or almost, but I felt like I couldn't talk. And I had to go to the bathroom. Came back, and I think he felt better.
Why did you feel the need to comfort him?
Because he was in tremendous pain. I got the impression he hadn't told anybody this before in his life. I was amazed that he had told me.
What was the importance of telling him that it had happened to you? Why did you think that was going to help him?
That he's not alone.
Because I didn't want him to think that it made him. He was saying it in a way like he couldn't be like me or something like that, and I wanted him to know that it was okay, and that didn't have any, and the same thing had happened to me, and that and to my brother, and that didn't make him anything strange.
Did you feel that about yourself, that what had happened to you didn't make you anything strange?
I really hadn't thought about it in a long time. And it was somewhat of I felt in some comfort myself that something had happened to him, although not really the same thing, but
Why? Why was that comforting that it had happened to him?
I don't know.
Why hadn't you told people? Had you told people before this that you remember, except your mother?
Cousin.
Why hadn't you told anybody before?
What about Diane?
Partly fear of my dad, for sure, would be one reason I never would. But also, I was already feeling like an overly, I had stuffed animals, I had these problems with the girlfriends, and I felt so much lesser than my dad, and lots of shameful feelings, embarrassment with, even back when the bedwetting was happening. I mean, it was just one thing after another, and I wanted to put this out of my mind, and my dad never brought it up. So I didn't ever tell anybody.
Was it a painful memory? Or a memory that didn't matter?
It was obviously very painful, but I really didn't allow myself to think about it until, my best friend mentioned, talked about this, and he was crying, and I could barely talk, but I felt I couldn't not tell him. I just told him.
Did you do it for him or to make you feel better?
I think I did it for him.
Did it make you feel better to tell him?
Which, I mean, him saying I didn't allow myself to think about it for a long time. That seems pretty real and honest, because the brain does form certain protections for itself when you go through traumatic experiences, either because you can have actual amnesia about it sometimes, or because you choose to sort of block that out yourself until you're confronted by it because somebody else brings it up or some other situation is similar enough that it sort of triggers that memory again, and then you're forced to deal with it again. And so, yeah, so that that does ring a little bit true. I'm surprised he didn't say anything about telling his cousin Diane about it.
I think we both felt a lot better, for sure.
Did that make you even closer?
Oh, yes, we made much closer after that.
Now, you'd met him in February of 89, is that correct?
I think it's February.
February or March?
Yeah.
In May of 89, was that after you'd had this conversation with Donovan that you received a phone call from your dad?
Yes.
Your everyday sheep, you might be
And-
right about that.
What did your dad tell you?
Well, my dad told me that he knew about Donovan.
Now, did you know what he meant when he said he knew about Donovan?
Yes.
And what did he mean?
My friends had been telling me that Donovan was basically a con artist. And they were giving me different examples, especially Glenn
Glenn, who
Stevens.
he give you examples of lies that Donovan had?
Yeah, he said that Donovan had written some poetry that he had hanging on his wall that his mother had given him, recognized as poetry, and that Donovan had showed it to him as if it was his. It had different poems he said he wrote. I think the name of it was The Man in the Glass. I'm pretty sure. And he said that he had read the paper that Donovan had helped me with at school. Donovan would help me with schoolwork or do some of it and be involved. And that Donovan could barely spell properly and the grammar was terrible. And there was no way that this kid had gotten into Princeton, especially transferring.
Did Glenn seem to be encouraging you to sever your relationship with Donovan?
Yes.
Did you want to do that?
No.
Why?
Because I loved him.
And so Glenn's giving you this information, and then you get a phone call from your father. Is that right?
My dad found out somehow and said that he wasn't enrolled in the school and to move his stuff out.
Move Donovan's stuff out?
And get rid of him.
What did you say?
And he was furious, and he was saying, this kid lied to my face, and he moved the fucking kid's stuff out. And he knew I wasn't going to want to do it. And I just sort of said, well, maybe he has an explanation, I'll talk to him. He told me he would fly out and move his stuff out himself. And I definitely didn't want that to happen.
Did you believe he would do it?
Yes, I believed he would do it. And I figured he found out through my Aunt Terry somehow. I expected him to fly out, but I told him I would handle it. He said, okay. So I had some more talks with Glenn, who also said that that he wasn't in the school. And although there didn't seem to be any way to verify it that we could find. But in any case, I had to get his stuff out. So I told him I'll just talk to him and I'll get his stuff out. And they said, no, we want to be in the room with you because we know you. You're gonna give in to this, to him, and you're gonna allow him to. The guy obviously tells, lots of different stories, and so they sat in the room.
Who's they?
Glenn and Hayden. So we went in the room. I told Don I needed to talk to him, and I told him that it breaks my heart, but he's got to go. And
Did it break your heart?
It did. And he was crying, and he wanted to explain to us why this had all come about, which I now know the reasons, but Glenn basically was rushing me and rushing him. And next thing I knew, we were moving his stuff out. And we wouldn't give him a chance to explain. I think one of my friends made a comment that while he was taking time, he actually suggested that we leave and he'd take time to think about, get himself together because he was crying and explain to us why this happened. And somebody made a comment that he was just going to steal more things and that he was going to have to go now. And they backed his truck up to the window.
Who backed his truck up to the window?
Hayden. And started moving things into the car, into the truck.
Who was moving things into the car?
Glenn and Hayden and Donovan. And I took the time to try to sort out what was mine and his because I had no idea on a lot of stuff. We shared clothes. We shared pretty much everything. So we did that. And my room was just a shambles. And I felt still like we were rushing him, but
How did you feel when you were cleaning these things out?
I was losing the one friend I had, and I really felt in a way that was going to be inevitable after the conversation in California. But once my dad found out that he wasn't even in Princeton, then he had lost all value to my dad. And so it really didn't matter how I felt about it. He was going to go. I wasn't going to be able to spend any time with him. So
How did Donovan seem?
And it hurt me that he had not told me the truth. I couldn't understand it considering the other things he had told me. And
Did you confront him with that? Why did you lie?
No, I wanted to, but everything happened so fast. I couldn't.
Did Donovan appear to be sad?
He was crying.
Were you sad?
Yes. I don't know if I was crying or not, but I was very heartbroken over it.
So you said that they were putting things into Donovan's truck?
Hmm?
Yes.
Yes.
How long did it take for them to get him moved out?
After I sorted the things out, not only 20 minutes at the most, put it all in the truck, and then Donovan got in and pulled out to the little street that goes through the campus, and I just watched him leave.
How'd you feel?
I felt bad for him.
How about
As
for
much.
you?
I was very sad over it. And I don't know, I thought somehow, he and I would get back together.
Did you ever see him again after that until you saw him in this courtroom?
No.
Did you ever talk to him again after that? Have you ever had a conversation with him since then?
No. We didn't, we had no idea where he lived. Nothing. No.
Did you sometime later find that he had left some of his things behind?
Yes, he left quite a few things behind in the mess.
What did he leave behind?
He left a leather sack, like a note, I don't know, what you call it, like a notebook kind of thing, that pouch that had all kinds of effects in it, papers, letters, things like that. He left, I believe, his typewriter, if I remember, and a bunch of other papers, other things.
Did you at some point realize he had left behind his driver's license?
Yes.
When did you realize he'd left behind his driver's license?
We saw it among the stuff. It was in the leather pouch. And
When you say we saw it, who saw it?
Glenn and Hayden and myself.
And was that the day that he left, that you saw it in the leather pouch?
Yes.
And what did you do with it?
And his bank card, too.
What did you do with those things?
Glenn took the bank card. and everything else I left there. And basically just left. I mean, I didn't really live there, so I just left everything a mess right there. And that day I was really, down, depressed, and I didn't even bother with any of the stuff. And Glenn was going to try to do something with the bank card to recover the amounts of money that he had taken from me, which he had taken money, but he didn't have the PIN number or anything, so he wasn't going to be able to do that anyway.
I'm sorry? All right.
Just a second. Did you at some point see his driver's license?
Yes.
By the way, I think we have some folks that probably came in because of Kurt's live stream on civil law, sending a bunch of people over here. So thank you to Kurt for sending folks over, and to everybody else that is new in here from his stream. Welcome, welcome. Quick trigger warning on all of this stuff, because there is all kinds of abuse that we are getting into here in the Menendez trial. This is Lyle Menendez's testimony. I think probably for the rest of this stream, I don't think we're going to get into any more awful abuse like what we've been encountering in other streams. But anyhow, just general trigger warning. So for folks that are having a hard time with it, do what you need to do to take care of your mental health as we continue watching this.
When?
In the room after he left.
And where did you place the driver's license and the other papers? If you remember.
We just left him there.
In the room?
Mm-hmm.
Say yes?
Yes.
And when is the next time that you saw his driver's license?
My Aunt Terry found it when she cleaned out my room.
When was that?
It was about a month later or so.
Is that the end of the semester?
Yes.
And was your brother there for that weekend?
Yes.
What did you do with the driver's license?
She gave it to me, and I gave it to Erik.
Why did you give it to Erik?
So he could use it as a ID, since he and Donovan looked pretty much kind of like each other.
Why would he need an ID?
Because he was underage. He was 18.
And Donovan was?
At that time, 22.
So he could get into places where they served alcohol?
Right.
After your Aunt Terry cleaned out your room.
That's actually a reasonable explanation.
And you moved out of Princeton.
There was this big question of like, why did Lyle take the ID? Why did he keep it? Why did he, how did it end up where it ended up? Right. And so it actually kind of makes sense. There are a lot of older siblings that would do something along those lines for a younger sibling to say, hey, you want to get into a bar? You want to go, go to some club or what have you? Come with me with my friends or something, but if they can't because they're under 21, then you either get a fake ID or you have someone else's ID that you happen to come across, or you're borrowing it or something like that. Obviously not legal, would not recommend it, but it is something that does happen in college, particularly for, college kids that are between 18 and 21. It's very, very, very common. So that explanation actually is fairly reasonable in my opinion.
Did you return home to the Beverly Hills house?
Yes.
And were you scheduled?
And then just because I do see that, yeah, but do that, but not make any attempt to return it to the former friend. You have to remember this is also, people that are in their early 20s. So Lyle is not exactly a problem solver. So the idea that he is going to go around and I mean, he couldn't even solve the issue of his housing, right? Like his plan was to like sleep in a hallway when he couldn't have the room that he wanted and that his father wanted him to have. I don't know. I mean, it's not to like take the defense of Lyle here, but I can see plenty of college students being like, whatever, he'll just get a new one, right? He'll report it missing or something, and you know, he'll end up getting a new one if that's a problem for him. But there's also the question of like, did he even know where Donovan went? Things obviously ended on a sour note. There's a number of things here that can indicate like why he didn't actually end up returning it to him. So would it have made him a better person to track him down and find him to return it? Absolutely, 100%. You know, I'm not saying that he's a perfect human being here, or even necessarily a good one, particularly when it relates to this particular issue. But I can see a lot of people just kind of being like, about that.
To go back to Princeton in the fall.
Yes.
And how did you feel about going back to Princeton?
Much better.
Why?
Because of the arrangement my dad and I had made with the grades, which was a very large source of stress for me. And that had been alleviated, and just felt better. I was playing tennis at a high level, and I had not been able to play in the spring.
Why hadn't you played in the spring?
Because of the year suspension. I had a choice. I could either play that spring when I came back, or I could not play in the spring and then play the rest of the years. In other words, if I played that spring, I'd have to take my senior year off of tennis. And the coach wanted me to play that spring. Told my dad he didn't think it was a good idea for me just to be not playing for a semester, but my dad told him, no, I'll take the spring off, because with my age difference, I was going to be able to compete very favorably collegiately because I was so much older. And he thought especially my senior year, I might have a good chance at a national championship because of my age and my ability. So take the spring off. So I didn't play tennis all spring.
Did you want to play tennis that spring?
I wanted to play, and occasionally coach would let me play with the team. But mostly I played with the girls until I met Isla, or played with other lesser people that weren't on the team but were good in the area, because I grew up there, so I knew enough players, so I played with them.
So you were going to get to play tennis for
So I was going to start on the team, and the guy that was really above me on the team, his name was Jacob Leshley, was gone because he had graduated. And so the expectation was that I would play the top spot, and it would be a good year. And so I was excited about that.
You were looking forward to playing tennis. Were you on probation?
I was on probation for the pool table incident.
Okay. Were you on probation for your grades also?
I was on a academic probation for failing one course, which my dad was not pleased about, because we had the agreement that I would pass them all. So my grades did drop, but too low. So they were going to I opted to take it again as a fifth course the next year, instead of just not taking the credits. So I was just going to retake the course.
And what was your housing arrangement going to be when you went back?
The housing was, I told my dad I really wanted to live off campus. And he agreed, especially after the fiasco with Donovan. His feeling was that hanging out at the school was a bad idea for me. It distracted me. It's a good idea I'd be off campus. And so we talked about it, and eventually I just wanted to rent something in town close by. the rents were pretty expensive. We were sort of talking about that, and at one point we had arranged maybe to rent a place in town, and then my mom was going to get a place next door. And then there were these great condominiums in this complex about a mile up the road, a half mile, a mile, something. And my dad decided to actually buy me a place so that I wouldn't have to worry. I could paint it or do what I wanted to do, and he would know where I was, and he would own the place. So he bought it.
Were you excited about living in the condo?
Very excited, especially since I had a kitchen, and I liked that.
Was your mom going to pick out furniture for you?
She was supposed to pick out furniture for me, but if for some reason, she was really in a bad way that summer, so I kind of expected my Terry and I to do it.
And was there a place in the condo where your parents were going to stay when they came to visit?
Yes, they were going to stay in the other suite. There were 2 suites in the condo.
So that would be their room, basically.
Right.
And were you looking forward to what your social life was going to be back in Princeton?
Yes, basically, I was going to be dating, hopefully, this girl named Isla, and she was on the tennis team, the girls' tennis team, and I had practiced with her constantly because I had wasn't supposed to play with the team, so I played with her, and I called her many times in Austria where she lived over the summer, and I think the expectation was we would date when I got back.
Was she a Princeton student?
Yes.
Did you think that your dad might approve of her?
I think he would have approved of her. It's her family. She came from an illustrious family, actually royalty in Austria, and she was a tennis player, and she was very, I think he would have approved.
And at some point that summer, less than a week before your parents died, did things start to change in your family?
Yes.
And the Tuesday before your parents died, did you have an argument with your mother?
Yes.
And what happened in that argument? Where was the argument?
In the den of Beverly Hills house.
Who was there?
Just my mom and myself.
Did at some point your brother show up?
A few minutes later, yeah.
What happened in that argument? Do you remember what the argument was about? Or was it just...
Not exactly. I believe it had to do with my hairpiece. I mean, it definitely at some point had to do with my hairpiece. I don't know why I was talking to her exactly, but...
And in the course of the argument, did she start yelling at you?
Yes, she was completely out of control, just flailing her arms and screaming at me about how I was going to be the cause of her father's death.
Let me go back. Had your brother been playing at a tennis tournament
I mean, she ended up being right, but just not the way that she expected.
just before this?
Yes,
And where was the tennis tournament?
in Michigan.
And were there some travel plans that were supposed to take place after the tournament?
Yes.
What were those travel plans?
The 3 of them were gonna go visit my mom's dad in Canada,
Who's the 3 of them?
Erik and mom and dad.
And why were they going to go visit your mom's dad?
Because my mom said that he was very ill and possibly dying, and that this might be the last time she had a chance to see him.
And did they end up going to Canada to see her father?
No.
What happened that they didn't go to Canada?
My brother lost earlier in the tournament than my dad had expected. He was furious,
Who was furious?
my father, and decided he wasn't going to Canada, and to hell with my dad. And
Hi.
so he made arrangements to fly back.
And why didn't your mother just go on to Canada with Erik?
Speculation.
Sustained.
Were you told why your mother didn't go to Canada with Erik?
Yes,
What were you told?
that was because he might have a girl like Louise waiting for him in LA while she was with her dad. She didn't trust him. So she wouldn't leave without him.
So what did they do?
So they all came back early.
And did your mom continue to be upset about the fact that she didn't get to go see her dad?
Yeah, she was more than upset. She was really as bad as I'd seen her as far as anger. Really blamed myself in a way that it was our tennis that was going to cause her father's death. And
But you hadn't been the one that lost. It was Erik.
right. But when my mom goes off, she talks about your whole life. She brings everything into it. You're born and ruined her dreams, and just your tennis had ruined her life, and you're ungrateful and spoiled, and it just builds. And she works herself into this frenzy where she's just completely out of control, and will grab things and throw them. And this conversation, she was out of control right away. And she had been that way since she had gotten back, very down, angry, cold, and then just these explosions. And at this point, I was trying to have a conversation with her because she was in the den and seemed a little more relaxed, but she just exploded. And something about my hairpiece.
Did she do something?
Mm-hmm.
How long did this discussion, this argument, this rage go on?
Not very long. About a minute and a half, 2 minutes.
What did she do?
At some point, she was moving toward me, and I kind of put my arms up because she flails with her fists sort of wildly, and she reached and she grabbed my hairpiece.
Oh.
And she just ripped it off.
How was your hairpiece attached?
It's attached through like a solvent glue
Oh.
Under the skin?
under the skin.
Oh.
And what happened when she ripped it off? How did it feel?
Well, it was pain because you're supposed to use this blue chemical to detach it, and you can rip it off, but I looked in the mirror, my head was welling up, and my eyes had tears in them from the pain more than the embarrassment. And
Christ.
Why were you embarrassed? Your mother knew you had a hairpiece, didn't she?
she knew, yeah.
What was embarrassing about this?
Just being there in the house without it, and her having ripped it off was just unbelievably embarrassing. And then my brother was there also.
When did your brother come in?
I'm not sure when he came in or if he was already in the house, but he was standing by the doorway when I started going toward her to get the hairpiece back, and she threw it back to me. And my brother was just sort of standing there.
What did you think when she had the hairpiece? What did you think she was going to do with it?
I thought she was going upstairs, and for some reason she stopped, turned around and threw it at me. Said, "You don't need your fucking hairpiece."
Jesus.
And But, she threw it at me, so I got it back. So I only have one.
Did it worry you that she was going to take it away?
Yes, it worried me she was going to take it away.
Why?
That's just something my mother would do. Just keep it until my dad got home, which wasn't going to be for a few days. So I was going to go upstairs and try to get it from her if I could.
And what happened when you noticed your brother was there?
Nothing. I just looked at him and just really in shock over the whole thing. More my mother's, just that she would do that. Had never happened before, and she had rages before close to me, hitting me. And so I left. I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to talk to my brother. So I
Why
left.
didn't you want to talk to your brother?
Well, he didn't know I had a hairpiece. And so, my brother and I, there are things we don't talk about, and that was one of them.
Were you embarrassed in front of your brother?
I was completely embarrassed in front of my brother.
So what did you do?
So I went back to the guest house where I live to put it on. Back
But-
on.
Did your brother follow?
I was in the bathroom, putting it on with the temporary glue that they give us. And he came in and said he wanted to talk to me. And I told him, I'll be out in a few minutes. And I eventually came out.
Why didn't you let him come in and talk to you while you were putting it back on?
So I was embarrassed. And, I was embarrassed. So I waited.
How were you emotionally? How did you feel?
I was still, I was very, basically trembling kind of thing from just the overall embarrassment of the whole thing and the shock of my mother's reaction. So I really didn't want to talk to my brother.
Were you angry at her?
I was angry, but that was sort of washed over by the whole shock of the whole thing.
Yeah, no kidding.
So did you finish putting your hairpiece on before you talked to your brother?
Yes.
And when you came out, did you have a conversation with him?
Yes.
And did you talk about your mom or the hairpiece? Or what was the conversation?
He wanted to talk to me, and I could tell something was wrong. 'Cause he was sitting on the sofa, real timid, and
What did he look like physically? You started to lean forward, did he?
yeah, he was just sitting on the sofa like this. And his
Hunched over a little
Yeah,
bit?
his head was down, and I came in, he kind of looked up at me, and he looked down, and he said, "I want to talk to you." And I figured it was about my hairpiece or something, but it seemed like something was wrong, and something was wrong.
What did he say?
Objection.
State of mind, Your Honor.
All right, the objection is sustained. The answer will be received only to reflect the state of mind of the witness, Mr. Lyle Menendez.
What did your brother say to you?
He told me that some of his exact words, but he was very sad about the fact that he said we weren't a family because there were so many secrets, and that basically saying that he had never known about my hairpiece, which I knew, and that he was sorry that happened, and that he wished he had known, and I didn't have to be embarrassed, and
How did it make you feel when he was trying to comfort you this way?
not good, embarrassed.
Why embarrassed? You love your brother, don't you?
Objection.
Rephrase the question.
Why were you embarrassed? You and your brother, what kind of relationship do you and your brother have? What kind of relationship did you and your brother have this Tuesday in August, the 15th, I believe the date is?
Extremely.
It's kind of funny because that objection to vagueness of time is, in my opinion, a very ticky-tacky objection, because we know we're talking about the moment where he has this hairpiece reveal, that Erik sees Lyle's hairpiece for the first time. Like it's a ticky-tacky objection, in my opinion. But like but then the response from Lyle's attorney saying, on this date in August 8th in 1989, or whatever it was, whenever that was, specifically on this date, what was your relationship? It's just, it's funny. It's funny to me that's her way to just sort of like counter it. Oops, excuse me. Sort of counter that pettiness,
Extremely close, and I was more the person he mostly came to me, and when he had problems and like the gang thing or whatever it was, there were problems, he would come to me. And but there were a lot of things we didn't share and didn't talk about, because there wasn't, at least on my end, because there wasn't anything you could do. I mean, there was nothing he could do with the decisions my dad make if I didn't like them. And there was nothing he could do about what was going on in the house between mom and dad. So a lot of times we just hung out and we were close. But like he was saying, there were a lot of things that we didn't talk about. Some things I would never have talked to him about, like what happened to me. But and that's essentially what he told me. He went, he asked, he went on about how we weren't a family and that I was the only person he had. And he asked me to remember back to the time when I confronted my dad about him. And, I remembered. I said yes. And, I asked him what was wrong, because he was really didn't want to. It was like, he was basically shaking, and I asked him what was the matter, and at some point he couldn't tell me, and he just started crying, and I said, you could tell me, what is it? And he told me that those things with his dad were still going on, and I was just completely not believing. And
What'd you say to him?
I said, what things? He said, what things. And I said, how come you didn't tell me before? I said a lot of nasty things to him, basically.
What did you say to him?
I asked him if he liked it.
Ooh.
I asked him why he didn't tell me a long time ago. I asked him why he didn't fight back, because he said that Dad was forcing him. And he was just crying. I had no answers for any of it. Just crying.
Were you mean to him?
Unintentionally.
But you were mean?
Yes. And that made me, I was feeling extremely guilty.
I wonder if his attorney is intentionally sitting in this spot right now to block the camera from seeing Erik. I'm wondering, because at this point it's like they've been in the courtroom for how long now at this point? They know kind of where the angles are. I'm wondering. But also, yes, folks, catching in the chat, he once again said his dad. It's almost like Erik has, like, to him in these moments, Erik has a completely different relationship with Jose Menendez than Lyle Menendez had with Jose Menendez. It's like two different dads, two different relationships entirely at times. It's so strange, but definitely distancing himself.
Why were you
emotionally
feeling guilty?
I was feeling guilty because, I had, the 13-year-old conversation I just sort of let go. And I never really followed up on it. I didn't really want to follow up on it. I was so happy it went that well with my dad, and I just kind of let it go. And he told me this, and I was kind of like, and he didn't say that, but I felt like, you know, why didn't I do anything about it?
Like
Well,
he was blaming you somehow?
maybe he wasn't, but I felt
Were
that
you
way.
blaming you?
Yes. And also feeling guilty when I asked him if he liked it. And
What did he do when you asked him? If
I
he
was
liked it?
angry. What?
What did he do when you asked him if he liked it?
What did he do?
Yes.
He said, of course he didn't like it. And he just, I don't remember exact words, but
How was he
he was
acting?
crying. And I told him, you know, I believed him. And I did believe him.
Why did you believe him? You didn't believe him at first.
Rephrase the question.
Did you believe him at first?
Not really. I wasn't sure. I just didn't. It was the shock of it. That was just my response.
What made you believe him?
Just the way he was talking about it, just his tears, and I mean, it was obvious that it was true, and I just didn't feel my brother was going to. You know, there was no reason to lie. Clearly, he was coming to me, wanted me to do something about it, and it was true because, you know, my dad never denied it when I talked to him about it. So I knew it was true.
So after you got through telling him you didn't believe him, asking why he didn't fight back and everything like that, then did you talk to him differently about it?
Yes, when he started crying, that was very hard for me, and so I sat down with him and told him to relax and let's talk. And I was very shaky myself, just from the idea that, you know, my dad was still doing this, and basically trying to think about what we could do.
Did he want you to do something, or did he just want to tell you?
Objection, pleading.
Overruled.
I got the sense he wanted me to do something. That's why he was telling me for the first time.
What did you think he wanted you to do?
Help him somehow. He had no answers. He was, you know, at that time he was suicidal. And
Why do you say he was suicidal? What do you base
just
that
in
on?
talks with him over the summer, he was very depressed. My dad had been extremely rough with him. You know, I saw my dad punch him. I saw my dad be forceful with him over his grades at school. And
Which this can also be sort of partially caused by Kitty's behavior towards Jose, right? It's like in this family, it just seems like all the shit just rolls downhill, right? Someone catches it downhill, whether it's Kitty catching it from Jose, Jose catching it from Kitty, Lyle catching it from Kitty, you know, Erik catching it from Jose. It's like somebody's upset and it all the shit rolls downhill. It seems like ultimately to Erik, really more so than even Lyle, but to both of them. So it's like, you know, this idea that Kitty was, you know, taking all of her anger out on Jose and Jose was trying to placate her. Jose's not the type of person to normally placate someone. So, you know, as they were going through that period of time with Jose placating her, I was wondering like it's almost like pushing on a balloon, right? It's going to pop out on some other end of the balloon. It's not just going to, the air is not just going to stay inside, right? So Jose is likely to be acting out in some other direction. Where's that going to be? It makes sense for this to be getting worse for Erik during this period of time because Jose is taking his frustrations with Kitty out on Erik. Completely unhealthy, absolutely 100%, but just sort of going through like the psychology of how that would happen.
and he was having problems with a chemistry course or something like that.
And to answer the question, just because saying, but didn't Lyle say earlier he was aware of things moving to Erik back when he was about 14? Yes, but he said that he had talked to his father about it and told him to stop. And then he said that his father was like, okay, yeah, fine. it's not happening anymore. I don't know. I mean, it depends. Not everyone's going to believe that fully. Like I don't know that I would believe that interaction would go that way, because Jose was just so, it's just so contrary to the way that things normally worked with Jose. But, I don't know, but that is the way that Lyle says that things happened. So, different people are going to feel differently about that, but that is the logic of what they say happened, at least.
And he was feeling like he was sort of falling apart over the summer, although he was having some success at tennis. And when he lost this time.
Oh, and yeah, just because I appreciate you bringing up counterpoints, because it's important to be testing these ideas and to be, looking at things from multiple perspectives. So I appreciate that you've been doing that in the chat. Not at all frustrated by that at all, by any means. I love that you're doing that. And I love that we're able to have these discussions too, like in the chat, looking at it from multiple perspectives like that, challenging various sides in a respectful way. So I love it. Continue doing it if you want. Rachel Mills with a question: why does abuse matter at this point? They were adults. They did not have to stay with their parents. There still was, I mean, Lyle was testifying to the fact that he says that his father would drop in every couple of weeks, even when he was away at Princeton or staying with his Aunt Terry. He would just pop in like anytime he wanted. And it seems like he had the wealth to do it. He would fly regularly to New York for business anyway. So it wasn't much of a stretch for him to then go to New Jersey. So there is that. He also testified that there were plans for Jose to basically buy a peninsula in Florida and have this compound of like 7 homes and have everybody and their families, their future families, like live together basically in this thing, which is just absolutely nuts. So there's still a lot of control that's being asserted, financial control as well, and also just control of competence or incompetence, right? Lyle had 0 skills at this point to be a successful student or a successful employee, basically anywhere. And that was shown through his failure in working for 2.5 or 3 months for Jose's own company. And I have a feeling that Jose threw him into those roles, knowing full well that Lyle would not be able to do those things, would not be able to accomplish the tasks that were put in front of him, because it was like to computerize paper accounting, which he didn't know anything about computers, didn't know anything about accounting, and didn't really know anything about the business that was involved anyway. So it's like completely, like anyone would be able to look at that situation and understand, like, this is he's not setting him up for success at all. So there's a lot of ways that his life was constructed, even as an adult, to really be reliant upon his parents, and particularly his father. And so it all folds into the abuse as well that's happening kind of all at the same time. If the testimony is to be believed, obviously we've got to go through cross-examination, and that is really where the rubber hits the road for any witness. But let's continue on. We've got about 10 more minutes of today's testimony, because I don't think I see any other questions, unless there are some that I have starred. Yes, there are some questions from earlier, from folks that I haven't gotten to, but I have saved. So just so you guys know, if anybody else asks a question, I will be saving them to address them later. Okay.
He came back home. I knew how depressed he was. And so I was concerned for that. And then when he was telling me this, I thought part of it was just to tell me, but also to want me to do something, because he might kill himself.
Did you want to do something to help him?
Yes.
And did you think of a solution? I mean, did you have an idea of how you were going to handle this?
Yes.
What was your idea?
Just to tell my dad the same thing that I had done before, that, obviously didn't work, but I was able to talk to him about it. Basically, I told my brother, and we discussed it, and I told him that I felt I could sit down with Dad when he came back, and essentially, we held all the cards, and if I needed to, I could threaten to tell people.
What do you
And I
mean you held all the cards?
Well, insofar as that I could threaten to tell people. Obviously, this is something that would ruin my dad. And
But this is a man that you couldn't tell to stay out of what room you lived in, or
Right.
who your girlfriend was, or how did you think you could tell him this?
because of what was happening to my brother. I had no choice. At that point, my brother had told me, and he obviously wasn't going to go on with it. He was trying, I felt he was going to maybe try and kill himself or something of that sort. And I told him, I was glad he came to me, obviously. And I was still in shock of this whole thing, but I felt like I was going to talk to my dad. I was going to stand up for my brother. I had hurt him in the past this way. And I needed to do something. And I really believed that my dad would let him go.
Why? What did you have that was going to give you all this power over your dad?
Just really nothing except for that I knew. And then that was enough.
Why? Why wouldn't your dad say, go ahead, tell anybody you want?
Nice. I could ruin him with this. I thought he would, once he knew that I knew, and I was making him we were going to make a great deal with him. I was going to go in there and just say all we wanted was for it to stop, obviously, and then for Erik and I to go to the same school. And that's it. And, no retaliation, nothing of that sort, no exposing him, which I knew would be his number one concern, really only concern. And he knew I could do that, obviously. He would know that. And so I really felt if I just mentioned it to him that I knew and that it was going to stop, and if I was forceful and I wasn't weak with it, he would have no choice. At least that's what I felt that day.
Once you thought about it, were you fairly confident that this would work?
We were very confident, much more than we should have been. And my brother seemed relieved, although very nervous about me talking to my dad. And it, started to set in for me that this might not go as well as I hope. But I still felt like, what could he do?
Did you feel an obligation to your brother? I mean, why didn't you just say, I'm really sorry, it's too bad, and I'm headed back to Princeton soon, and I hope it works out? Why didn't you say that to him?
And I would never have said that to him, and he would never expect me to say that.
Why?
Just because we were brothers.
Did he stay with you in the guest house that night, or did he go back into the main house?
He stayed with me in the guest house, and I had a king-size bed, and we slept there. And I sort of stayed up and thought about
What did you
my
think
life.
about?
I thought back, and mostly I was trying to not think about my conversation with my dad, and I was just going back and trying to figure out how this could have happened without me knowing for so many years. And I basically felt that it could.
Why? How could it have happened in the house that you were in for at least a substantial part of the time?
Section speculation.
Rephrase the question.
You said you thought about how it could have happened without you knowing. Did you come up with an answer to that?
Only that, I hadn't talked to my brother, and I really didn't know any details about what happened. And, but I felt that based on what had happened to me, that I'm sure it had happened in his bedroom, times when I wasn't there. And I felt like, my dad lectured us behind closed doors, and, punishments were always behind closed doors. I got beaten behind closed doors. And, at times when cousins were living in the house, and I felt like this is something that was going on behind the doors.
Were there
And-
times when you would see your dad in Erik's bedroom?
Yes.
Would
And
you have ever gone in when your dad was in there with
No.
Erik?
nobody would have gone in.
Why?
That was the rule from when we were real little. Just did not go in when my dad was in there with either my brother or myself. Nobody ever came in. And I also thought about how my brother how he could have fought back. Just things like that. Just wishing that he could have done something.
Did you stay up most of the night?
Stayed up all night.
Were you troubled by this?
We were both, the world was going to be different.
Did you think you were going to have no relationship with your family after this?
No. We, well, I don't know what my Erik's relationship was going to be, but I expected that mine wouldn't change, hopefully, with my dad. I still expected to go to school, although Erik with me, unless I could transfer in time, maybe go to UCLA where Erik was supposed to go. But I really didn't expect to change. I mean, at that point, I figured my dad knew that I would have to do something about this, and I didn't feel he would hold that against me. And I figured my brother's 18 years old. I don't know how long he expected. I didn't know why it was going on, but I had always thought that was something. I just dismissed what happened to me as something that happens to little boys. And I really, even at the time when I confronted my dad before, I thought it was a strange thing because my brother was already 10 years old or so. And at 18, I figured my dad would let him go. And I didn't know why it was going on, but that he would. I felt confident that it would work out, and I wasn't going to mention it to anybody. And as long as my brother was okay, we would just go on.
Was your dad at home at the time, or was he gone?
He was gone
When was he due to come back?
on Thursday.
All right, let's take our recess. It's at the noon hour. We'll resume at 1:30, ladies and gentlemen. Don't discuss this case with anyone.
All right. So we will cut that off there because that is a good sort of almost halfway point on this chunk. And it has been almost 4 hours now. Longer stream a bit today, but yeah, we got through a lot. So all the way up through Erik revealing to Lyle that he has continued to be abused by their father, Jose. We learned about this sort of like change in dynamics of the family between Jose and Kitty because, she, I guess, finds out that he's been cheating on her and she doesn't even want to admit to Lyle that that's the reason why she's so upset. She wants to blame Lyle for everything. At least when she's talking to Lyle, she wants to blame him. Very, very interesting, but heartbreaking stuff to hear. Obviously, this is all direct examination. So like I said before, the rubber is going to hit the road at cross-examination. We're going to see what's going to happen. I'm not particularly looking forward to it because I think a lot of this comes across as very sincere and very real to me. But we'll see what happens. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, or I mean, maybe not enjoy, maybe that's not the best word for it. Right. But I hope you found it interesting or informative. This has been quite a journey to go on. This was episode 35 35 episodes so far. Wow. We are definitely making our way through here. Thank you guys for joining me for this stream and for this particular portion. And thank you, of course, as always, to the mods for helping to facilitate discussion that is robust and healthy and still kind to one another. Thanks to the folks that are pushing back on. I think the majority here feels like they are pro defense in this case, but I appreciate the folks that are actually kind of giving counterpoints and giving a different perspective on how they see things. I appreciate that because it's good to see sort of folks that have a different kind of opinion, because not everybody is going to see things the same way. And the same thing is true with a jury, right? I mean, this particular trial, ended with a hung jury. And Christian Williams, I see your are you going to read questions? My gosh, thank you for the reminder. I almost forgot. Okay, let me go through these first, and then we'll head out. Okay, Mindy says, can a motion in limine be done for a witness testimony so that whatever is said is meant to show a state of mind and not hearsay, therefore avoiding the hearsay objection? I think most likely the judge is going to be saying, if somebody submits a motion in limine like that, a judge is most likely going to say, if you have an objection, we will raise it at the time, and then we'll determine it at the time. Usually motions in limine are for subject matter or for people, like to say, we can't call someone, we will be calling someone, or for particular subjects to be, or evidence to be admitted or not admitted, or for subjects to be covered. For example, like, if Amber Heard brings up photographs, we are going to bring up the fact that she, that the metadata does not support the photographs, et cetera, et cetera. That's usually what motions in limine are going to be used for. So I hope that answers your question. Also, Mountain Princess 207, thank you so much for gifting 5 Legal Bites memberships. Very, very kind of you. And also Gina D, Menendez Trials, Veronica B, Chrissy Linen, and Nicole B. You are now members of Bite Club. Welcome, 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 and or welcome back. And I hope you guys can join us on Friday for our members only live stream. That's our casual stream just to talk about law or not law, all kinds of stuff. And thank you again, Mountain Princess 207 for gifting that. And Christian Williams says, random question, but do you know why most defendants don't testify? Is it because their attorneys are afraid of cross? Not so. It's because anybody has a Fifth Amendment right not to self-incriminate, and so that means getting up and testifying. So they have, whenever a criminal defendant actually does decide to testify in a criminal trial, they are waiving their Fifth Amendment right, and so the judge has to go through this whole process where they talk to the defendant and they say, on the record, they go through all these questions and say, okay, have you talked with your attorneys about this? You understand that you are waiving your right. And you understand that you have this right not to incriminate yourself. And part of it is because, it's not just because of the cross-examination. It's because the witness could unwittingly say something that isn't even necessarily accurate, but that self-incriminates. There are so many ways that can go wrong. So when a defendant does testify in a criminal trial, like that is a very sort of bold decision to make. Sometimes it's the necessary one though, so that they can actually give their side. In this case, this is one of those that I think it's pretty necessary for them. Christian Williams also said, would you be willing to stream the Rodney King case? It's under the title California versus Powell. I can't remember if I asked before. I think you did, and yes, it's on the list. It's definitely on the list for potential trials. So, okay, and I think that is all of the questions here. So folks, thank you so much for joining, and thank you to everybody that gifted memberships today. Very, very kind of you guys. And again, thank you to the mods for ushering the discussion. Thank you for everybody for engaging in the chat. Whether you are pro defense or pro prosecution, or, you think they were properly convicted, shouldn't have been convicted. I love the fact that there is so much interesting discussion between people that are just intellectually curious about this and really just examining the law and the facts. I love it. I love it. And doing so in a respectful way. It's one of the things that I love most about this community is that folks are like that here. And all right. That for me about does it. I hope that you guys have and yes, and thank you for folks that are maybe not engaging but just watching, just lurking. I see you guys too. I appreciate you guys, and also all the folks that are on replay crew. Love you guys also. And yeah, for everybody that is in Bike Club, I will see you guys on Friday, 10 a.m. East Coast time as before. And otherwise, I'll see you guys in the next video.